Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto dated a lot of women's and got harem part 2, and subscribe if you enjoy the video. And also check the description. So let's begin the story. While he was busy with the running from Konoha, the people currently at his place were busy trying to make sure that Karini was comforted as best as they could. Guy was telling the Anbu that the demon brat had nothing to do with this, while the Anbu were looking at him like he was the devil himself for defending that demon brat, as they liked to call Naruto. Karini was being cleaned up after Shizen had gotten some samples from her body and was currently awake, being held by Anko, who was whispering things about it all becoming alright once again after this, and that she'll pull through. They really have sunk so low as to do that to make Naruto-kun leave. First of all they harassed Karini-chan, then they dumped her here to incriminate him. If I knew who those mothers were, I'd let my snakes feast on their flesh while I watch how they scream in pain. Mitarashi Anko's thoughts were turning darker and darker as the moments progressed, her mind becoming more and more enraged as she could hear some of the medic needs sent to make sure that Karini was alright talk about giving the demon brat his just deserts for harassing such a beautiful woman. Anko threw a kunai which nicked the specified medic needs cheek and said, "Would you please keep your comments to yourself so that we don't have to hear them? I don't think Karini-chan would like to hear strange men talk about her and Naruto-kun. You like that demon?" The question hung in the air and Anko gave the man a glare laced with killing intent. To a certain extent, yes, I like him. I like him like a little brother, or maybe something more given time. But you are not to question me further about it. Come, get Karini to the hospital and do it quickly or I'll lob off your testicles. Karini shivered as she felt the warm arms of Anko around her. When the two men had harassed her, they had bound her arms and legs, and some of the wire imprints could still be seen on her hands as well as her legs. It had been dark when it happened. They had sliced away a part of her dress, then had gagged her with some cloth from her own clothes, a hand being used to keep her silent before that. "Finally we get you alone, Karini. Now you shall be that you really are. Having that demon was a wrong move. Now we shall make use of your body for our own pleasure. It was a pleasure studying under you, Karini-sensei. You taught me all that I needed to become Chunin, but I always loved you after that. The way your ass used to move when you made those hand seals has always been fascinating to me." Karini became unconscious before she could recall more of the memory, her mind exhausted by all the things that had happened to her on this day, needing rest to try and come to terms with what had happened. Naruto rammed his way through a tree which happened to be in the way at the moment, and then jumped and found himself in familiar territory, knowing the place very well. The Valley of the End was there, lying tranquil at the moment. He could feel the power within his body to lash out as memories of his last time here came back to him. Flashback. He really wants to kill me. His mind was racing as he saw Sasuke charge towards him. Only thanks to Kyuubi's advanced healing was he able to keep going. He dodged a strike towards his head only to be punched in the gut by the Sharingan-wielding Uchiha. He doubled over and got a foot slammed into his face, sending him back onto the water to slide a few meters away. "Konoha hates you. Everybody hates you. Only I like you like my own child. Embrace my power, call me father, and I shall do the rest." The evil voice spoke up within his mind. Naruto grasped his wits and spoke. "I won't fall for that, Kyuubi. I won't allow you to take over." A pause with the voice. A very long pause as he saw Sasuke power up a Chidori and slam it through his shoulder. "Without me you shall die and your name shall be forgotten to history. With me, you can become the greatest shinobi that has ever lived." "Well, if you put it that way, arg, damn that hurts. Then I accept Otosan." "Very well, you shall be the greatest, my son." A tremendous surge of demonic chakra began to surround Naruto as his body began to change, his canines lengthening to become fangs. 9 tails made of chakra grew from his tailbone, and a huge silhouette from the Kyuubi become visible. "Now you taste our wrath, Uchiha boy." A rush of chakra exploded outwards from the figure, blowing the other boy back. Naruto and Kyuubi looked at the boy to see 3 Tomo activated within the Sharingan eye. Naruto summoned a Kage Bunshin and then made the Rasengan, and ran towards Sasuke with the intent to damage him. Sasuke had activated his Curse Seal moments before, the 2 leathery wings stretching out of his back and a dark Chidori igniting in his hands. "Rasengan!" he shouted and thrust his arm. Sasuke looked at him and cried out, "Chidori! The two attacks collided in the air and struggled for dominance, making a black dome of power appear as the attacks began to clash. The power is too great to let one give way. The attack was finished and Naruto felt his consciousness slipping away, feeling darkness overtake all his senses. When he awoke, he was being carried by Kakashi back to Konoha with the news that Sasuke had escaped. And flashback. I will not fail again. They may see me as the Kyuubi itself, but I will not fail. I will destroy the village of Konohagakure. A deadly chakra began to surge around him, elemental powers beginning to awaken, and the waves of the water began to turn more and more violent as the infernal power of the Kyuubi began to control them, whipping them up to a frenzy while the rest of the landscape remained unaltered. The statues were being bashed by the water being wild and all, but Naruto doesn't care. He felt the raw anger at the fact that one of his precious people had been violated in a cruel and unnecessary way that flowed through him and bleed off into the environment. Come on, destroy them. Destroy that pathetic village that you call yours, and let yourself be gorged upon the destruction that you will unleash. I shall not take this longer. I rule my fate, my destiny, and nobody is going to change that. At the moment he proclaimed that, clouds came in the sky almost miraculously and it began to rain, soaking him to the skin. The chakra began to twist and turn until 9 tails were present, madly swirling, giving him the image of being the living embodiment of the great Kyuubi, while he was only the container. The dread that he generated was enough to make sure that the place would forever be tainted by it, nothing being able to grow there since the poisonous demonic chakra had flowed through the ground, which had been tainted by it. Tsunade looked towards the area where the massive surge of chakra came from and identified it immediately, knowing that only Naruto could generate such a huge amount of chakra at once, or that there was someone attempting to summon a Biju, something which she didn't think probable since there would be a lot of human sacrifices needed, and she knew that no town was that close to the village hidden in leaves. Kiba felt the dread strike him at the moment. He was busy trying to wash both himself of the scent of Karini, trying to clean it off so nobody would be able to discern that he was the one who did it. Even if she smelled slightly like him, he could attribute it to having met her before, trusting fully on Asuma to make sure that she didn't talk or wake up. Asuma was currently busy with making some small deals with the shinobi he called trusted. They all hated Naruto and thus would gladly incriminate them if it made sure that the demon Gaki was dead. The shinobi would spread the word about the harassment, and Naruto would either have to face the council or be executed for his crimes against Konoha. Naruto focused on his hatred and he called it up, his own chakra mixing with the demonic chakra. A purple streak crossed the massive swirls of chakra and Naruto's eyes began to widen in anticipation as he could expect something unusual to happen. A huge thunderbolt struck the spot where he was at, making him feel the pain and enraging him even further, beginning to fuel his hatred for Konoha even more as he began to sink into a trance which allowed him to gain more and more power so that he could do something about the problem he was facing. Kyuubi was watching as his container, and also adopted son, began to call upon the full never-ending power that he possessed. He gave more and more, not even beginning to get drained for a second as he felt the power refill immediately. Naruto would need to be immersed within his power before the destruction could occur. A bright gleam entered the blood-lusting eyes of the Kyuubi as he imagined the slaughter that Naruto would create. The blood that would flow would make sure that the streets were painted red for a long time. A pillar of water began to form, almost in the style of Suryuden no Jutsu, but different as the pillars seemed to be splitting in multiple parts, which shot out to different directions, impaling themselves within the walls of the valley. Naruto felt like his body was on fire as the element of water became bound to his will, not needing seas, but a massive amount of chakra to be controlled. A growl came from his mouth as he thought about Karini, who lay there, covered in the fluids of those that harassed her, and a blizzard of demonic chakra sprung up around him with full intensity, shredding the landscape around him and alerting every single ninja to his presence for the next 20 miles. Anbu raced towards the spot where the demonic chakra was felt and looked at Naruto, standing there within the tornado of chakra, looking at the ground currently, bones snapping and popping, which was a sign that something was changing his bone structure. Uzumaki Naruto, cease with your summoning of that chakra. You are under arrest for the harassment of one Yuhi Karini, and will be sentenced by the village council, and they shall decide your fate. The Anbu captain said with his voice shaking slightly as he felt extremely uneasy around Naruto. His team members were looking at him like he was mad for trying to get through to the Jinchuriki. I won't come with you. You shall not take me since I had nothing to do with the defilement of the mortal woman known as Yuhi Karini. The voice shocked them slightly, as they had all heard his voice be loud and would be able to recognize it instantly if they heard it, their memory having added it to the category of extremely annoying voices. Naruto had intruded upon an Anbu meeting once, shouting something about the villagers being mean again. It had made some Anbu who liked the kid chuckle as the kid casually addressed the Hokage as Jishin and demanded that he do something about it. The Hokage had tried to get him out of the meeting, but it was to no avail. Naruto simply gave him a glare, and then stated that he wouldn't leave until Jishin did something about the glares he got every moment of the day. The Anbu captains gave a chuckle at the kid's persistence, being reminded of the departed Yondaime, as he had a stubborn streak a mile wide. He can stay, Hokage-sama. In a way I would doubt that he would ever betray our identities, and even if he did know us, it would be almost impossible to guess who we were thanks to our masks. The Anbu captain who had spoken was now receiving looks of incredulity from the rest of the Anbu. Hatake Kakashi looked at them and pushed up his Hitai once again as the Sharingan was about to be revealed. When we wear our masks, we won't be able to be recognized until we speak. And I don't even think he knows our names, so why bother? The young captain gave a smile at Naruto, knowing the hardship that the kid was going through. Alright, Naruto-kun, would you please take a seat near the back of the room? I have some business to discuss with these people. Oyaji was a small commentary on it, and the Hokage gave him a small smile and said, This is just for grown-ups, Naruto-kun. A little boy like you should have no place here, but I'm letting you stay anyhow since I trust you won't reveal anything about the identities of these fine men and women. Naruto nodded, looking like an eager child, which he was. He took a seat next to an Anbu who looked to be a few years older than him and gave a beaming smile at the Anbu who simply gave a disinterested look at him. Anbu-san? What rank are you? The question took the Anbu off guard and he mumbled. A captain rank Anbu, Uzumaki-san. Naruto looked at him with bright blue eyes and said, Could you teach me some awesome ninja skills? The Hokage watched the exchange between Uchiha Itachi and the young Naruto with a smile on his face. Hopefully this would thaw the young Anbu captain out of his icy shell, which had been made unto him by Danzu, the leader of the Anbu training facility which had been shut down earlier that month due to inhumane ways of learning people to become Anbu. He knew that a few people within the Anbu were still loyal to that man, but the majority did as he had asked, and had been transferred to a normal Anbu academy. I don't think that would be appropriate, Uzumaki-san. The members of the Anbu looked at each other. Teach Kubigaki? That was the thought that went through their heads, and they looked at the Hokage for any sort of order. Only you would think to ask an Anbu captain to teach you jutsu, Naruto-kun. The Hokage was chuckling slightly and Itachi blushed a bit as he realized that he was the main focus of the Hokage's attention, and then nodded and said, May I teach Uzumaki-san a few basic skills, like Henji no Jutsu and Kawarimi no Jutsu for him to avoid civilians who might be after him for some sort of reason? The Hokage gave a sign of approval and the meeting continued, making Naruto rather excited at learning jutsu from the Anbu captain. The rest of the meeting went silently, with the Hokage talking about unity between the Anbu and the other shinobis and that every matter should be investigated, even the ones that concerned a certain someone in this room. Who he meant was obvious, the child not understanding that it was about him, but paying attention anyhow. The Anbu looked at the youngster who was being surrounded by that infernal chakra when a team member spoke up. Sir, he's manipulating the water. And indeed, a great wave came towards them, the youth not even seeming slightly afraid of it, and as the water hit his body with great force, nothing was felt by him as he controlled the water, and willed it not to hurt him, only to teach the Anbu the lesson not to mess with him. This is merely a fragment of my power. His voice was heard even though the water had already seemingly swallowed him, and the Anbu watched as the water seemed to freeze after it had swallowed Naruto, then slowly watched as the water which had embedded itself within the canyon's walls began to join the big stream of water and a miniature tornado made of water began to form around Naruto, before being sent at them with massive force behind it. This is going to hurt, was the shared thought of the Anbu before the water hit them, making them all black out due to the force behind it. The Uzumaki kid seemed to be on a sanine level, something which didn't bode well for the village if they angered him in any way. All the kid probably wanted was to be left alone, and we disturbed it. Well, time to pay the price. Naruto looked at the unconscious Anbu team, and gave a small smile and said, "There is no repentance for those who have fallen. So I shall reap what the villagers have sown. When my exile has been made certain, Konoha shall die." The words were spoken and they weren't heard by anyone, but the vow still stood. When he was to be exiled, he would wreak havoc and eliminate the majority of Konoha's forces with his power. You might want to try and get a girlfriend first, since girls would be rather cross with you if you killed their family, and then ask them to go on a date with you with possible later things in store for the two of you. Kyuubi's voice rang through his head and he looked at the ground, which was shaking a bit due to the power release, the water making it all muddy and sludgy. "Let's dance." He began to practice what he did best, doing high-level jutsu enhanced with his chakra, with the Kyuubi's additional chakra supporting it, and letting him make more realistic things happen with his genjutsu, making his Katon jutsu destroy and burn more ground or targets, improve the force that he used on an unfortunate tree which served as taijutsu practice target, which slowly began to be cut down by the force of his blows and was good enough for firewood 3 minutes later. "Awake at last, Anbu-san." The voice roused the Anbu captain, who groggily sat up and mumbled, "What the hell was that?" and then looked at the Kyuubi's container, taking note of the feral look which Naruto seemed to have gained, finally looking closer than the initial making contact had allowed. "Uzumaki Naruto-san, could you please come with us to Konoha? You beat us fair and square, using a Suiton jutsu to knock us out, but we are merely doing our job and I'll come with you to Konoha." The answer was short and to the point, making the Anbu captain look up towards the Jinchuriki. "Hanto? Well then, after I've woken up most of the team, assuming they are still asleep and I wasn't the last to be awakened." He took a look around to see that the other Anbu were still knocked out, grinning as he saw that one of the Anbu had his hair all messed up, which was a bad thing for the guy because he absolutely cherished his hair, taking great care for it every time before they went on missions for Hokage-sama. "Wake up, men! We got a job to do!" In a style which seemed reminiscent of a drill sergeant, he awoke all of his team members and then looked at them and said, "All right, Uzumaki Naruto-san has agreed to go with us back to Konoha. Let's go." Naruto nodded and the Anbu team watched as he jumped into a tree, then going towards the direction Konoha was in. They followed suit, taking not much manners to disguise where they were, since they didn't expect anyone to attack them, even though they technically should be on the lookout for any enemy attack. They approached the gates of Konoha and Naruto paused, and smoke enveloped his form to disappear after a few seconds, giving him red hair and blood-red eyes. "Let them see the creation they have made with their hatred. Let them see the anger which is me." He spoke and he began to advance upon the gates, going as far as to jump right in front of the Chunin guard and growl menacingly, letting the poor woman shriek like a banshee as a feral-looking man jumped from the woods to growl at her. The appearance of the Anbu team, as well as the fact that Naruto had already disappeared, helped her calm down, and hope that she wasn't going to be scared by more weirdos who felt like tormenting her. What a scared little girl. Well, I hope that there would be someone who could offer slight resistance to fear effects. You call that slight? That human woman almost jumped from her skin in fright when she saw your looks. Kyuubi's voice was calming him down from the anger which was flowing within him. He quelled the anger he felt and could sense that there were people who were interested in him, having gained gifts over the years, including a slight control over the elements. The element of water was fully under his command, being the easiest to master due to it being a fluid, and fluids tended to be very easily moved by the force of chakra. It doesn't matter much, Too-san. Humans are so frightened of you that they would hurt me to get to you. I'll kill them before they will ever lay a hand upon you, not that they could with you sealed within me. By the way, how do you think I should try to help Karini-chan? I reserved my anger for the ones who did this to her, and had the stupid idea to frame me for it. His mental dialogue was answered with a deep chuckle from the inhabitant that he now called father. Healing the mind is a very difficult thing to do, my son, especially with a woman who has been violated as she has. Her mind will have had no time to cope with it all. A long time ago, before this world reverted into this primitive state, there were doctors of the mind which began to study harass victims and the like. The ways that were used to treat them may still be in use at this date, but I don't think they know of a way which can be used to heal one's mind after a harass. There was a famous doctor who had said something about an Oedipus complex or something like that. It's like killing your father and marrying your mother. The beast gave a pause and then stated, I knew the Oedipus guy, and he didn't marry his mother at all. He did kill his father though, by just killing him when the guy refused to lend him some aid with killing a wild boar. I know a lot about those people who were renowned in your ancient history. If you really want to know who he married, then I'll tell you that it was his oldest sister. I was at the wedding, disguised as a man serving drinks to the people. It was funny until there was some trouble with the food and most of the servants were executed. Kyubi gave a harsh laugh within Naruto's mind and a smile came upon Naruto's face as he entered the Hokage tower, hoping that this matter would be attended to swiftly. Hokage-sama, you can count on me and my dogs. We will get to the bottom of that terrible event. The voice was slightly boisterous, and seemed to belong to a female whose identity he couldn't identify. 3 seconds afterwards the door was opened and a young woman was excited, and Naruto saw 2 red streaks on her face, signifying her as an Inuzuka, her dogs following her, being pretty large for their size, coming around his waist, and he was considered to be tall. Tsunade-sama, why did you send that team of absolute numbskulling bastard undertakers to me? They bugged me while I was just beginning to release Kyubi's power. He looked at the blonde woman as she looked at him with her right eye twitching slightly. They are called Anbu, and don't mock them because I could send them after you hide and you wouldn't be able to do anything against it since I am Hokage and you are not. I may love you but there are limits to my patience, Naruto. She was very irritated thanks to the fact that she had to provide the chakra needed for healing Yuhi Karini and had to deal with the irritating doctors who gave her the friendly advice to cast out that hell-spawned demon Gaki. That had almost made her lose her calm, but she had gathered herself again and then had finished healing the external wounds, taking a note that Karini probably needed to talk to someone who she was familiar with, Anko volunteering to do it immediately. First of all, the scent pattern would have to be checked, as well as a genetic match to be found from the files of the Jounin to Chunin level shinobi, and maybe even the Genin. This could not go unpunished as long as she was Hokage. It was an affront to all women to let one of their number get harassed, and all the blame to be shifted on some poor boy who didn't have anything to do with it. Did you harass Yuhi Karini, Naruto-kun? She looked him in the eyes, looking for any sign of guilt but found none. I.e. Tsunade-sama, I had nothing to do with the harassment of Yuhi Karini, but I intend to make sure that the people who did it will face their worst nightmare. A dark chuckle followed, making the air within the room slightly heavy, like there was something ominous brewing in the blonde youth. Will you agree to have your scent checked by Inuzuka Hana to check if you were anywhere near Yuhi-san during the time of the violation to her body? She watched as he nodded and remarked, Did you know that my ability to smell scents is even greater than any dog? Kyubi gracefully let me inherit the gift. After all, he wouldn't let his dear container suffer from any harm due to not being able to smell the enemy. Naruto looked at the woman who gave a curt nod and said, Bring Inuzuka Hana in, UNBA captain. The man saluted the Hokage and the team poofed out of the room, looking for the dog user. Karini was still unconscious as she was put into a bed and then checked by the medical staff who all kept on muttering things like how that demon should die. Anko was less than pleased at it, and just silenced one of the doctors by letting a snake wrap around the throat of the man, looking him in the eyes and saying, Uzumaki Naruto was with me the entire time since I had to discuss something with him, which also can be confirmed by Shizen-san as well as the daughter of Ichiraka Tuchi. As for accusing him, I'd like it if you would keep silent while in her presence. She pointed at Karini and then continued, It seems like you may not learn all there is, Medic-san, so let me give you one warning. Speak about Uzumaki Naruto in a way I don't like and you'll get your chopped off and eaten by me, so unless you want me to do that, keep your mouth shut, she growled out, and looked at him, her eyes turning yellow for a brief moment, a small reminder of her sensei creeping through into her eyes, turning them like his own, when he was angry or feeling another strong emotion. You asked for me, Hokage-sama? The woman looked at the Hokage and her blonde guest and immediately there was a serious look on her face, where there had been a slightly carefree look moments ago. Hi Inuzuka-san. I would like you to do a full investigation of Uzumaki Naruto's scent, and if he has harassed Yuhi Karini. The Hokage remained ice-cold throughout all this, hiding her feelings for Naruto as she knew that when Hana filed her report, and that it didn't mention anything about Naruto being the one who had harassed Karini, then he'd be free of suspicion, and hopefully he might still stay in Konoha, or else there would be a Hokage going rogue and be labeled an S-rank nukenin. She hadn't taught Sakura all that she knew, taking some jutsu for private use only, something which she considered her right, as she had been the one to invent them after all, and didn't think that Sakura was worthy enough to learn them. There were also some jutsu that were jounin rank and still couldn't be taught to Sakura because she had such low chakra levels. She on the other hand had greater chakra levels than most people in the village, excluding the other Sannin and the previous Hokage. Naruto was the only one who could easily surpass her with chakra levels that would rip apart the very earth around him if he released them. The fourth tail of the Kyuubi would make him more prone to go into a berserker mode and would not make sure that there would be no damage inflicted on him. Uzumaki-san, follow me to my house, and we'll do it there, and afterwards I would like to talk to you. The voice was serious, unlike her younger brother who had once joked around while in class. Naruto followed her without a shred of a doubt that she would subject him to a full investigation, and just followed the flow. They walked through the village, the villagers and shinobi giving Naruto dirty looks who he returned with blood-red eyes and a snarl at times. He could feel how the heartbeat of most people began to quicken the moment that he passed, and he could smell the fear thick within the area when he passed, knowing that they were all too scared to do much against him. Yes. Scare them. Make them feel pure terror before you rip out their throat. Kyuubi cheered within his mind and Naruto smiled a bit, a deep bloodlust within the smile, which made it look creepy on his face. He looked at the woman who was leading him towards her house and grinned, not really all that interested in facing a full examination by someone who used dogs. Cousin! I'm home! She shouted when she approached her home, her blonde companion scowling slightly. A woman he recognized as Kiba's mother came out of the house, and looked at the pair with eyes which seemed to be looking for something. Hi boy. How are you today? It took him a few seconds to process that this woman was speaking to him, and he answered, I'm fine. At the moment, Inuzuka-san. Your lovely daughter is about to subject me to a full-body search, or something on the order of the Godame Hokage. Something I'm not too pleased about since I would be under constant fire from Tusan. I am not that bad, Naruto-kun. I just want to make sure you have some fun, and I heighten the pheromones your body produces slightly, allowing more and more females to like you in a way other than thinking of you as a demon. Naruto groaned and said, Tusan just told me that my pheromone production has risen slightly, with effects that he wouldn't clarify. He kept on mumbling something about maybe making sure that the thing was sealed for a month so he couldn't talk to it but still access Toucan's power. The Chunin and the Jounin's eyes widened slightly as they beard that he referred to Kyuubi as father, and Sim had enough courage to ask, You call Kyuubi your father? Naruto nodded and said, Hi. He's like a father to me, helping me out whenever I need it and offering advice about doing things. He blushed at the thought that was running through his mind, of a certain Hokage screaming his name as they lay between bed sheets, and twisting and relishing in each other's presence. Alright, enough daydreaming Uzumaki-san. I am going to need you to go into the house and then follow me. Cousin, can I use that room? She asked her mother, who nodded and said, Do you need to use my dogs too? I don't have any mission for the next 3 days so they are free if you want to take them, but only with their permission, Sim said, looking at her daughter with a slight smile on her face. Her daughter could be as rough as possible with her examination there without being disturbed. As the two entered the house, Hana having rejected the offer of using her mother's dogs, favoring her own dogs over those, and they walked through the house, greeting some family members every now and then, with Naruto simply giving a small grunt in recognition, while Hana greeted them. They came to a room which was labeled, Torture Room. Naruto gave an uneasy glance at Hana who smiled slightly and said, Don't mind the title, Uzumaki-san. You'll find out that the room is not a torture room at all, but merely a room in which most members of the household go to have some peace and quiet. But often, there is nobody within the room due to the fact that most of us are busy with missions and other stuff. She opened the door to see an empty lounging room and she ordered Naruto to stand in the free space in the middle, his legs spread slightly. When he had done so, He could feel the nose of a dog sniffing his left leg, and then he said, "Shall I go lie down? That way it would be easier." She nodded and he laid down, his eyes turned towards the ceiling. Immediately he could feel a dog smelling his left side, then continuing to his private parts. Then suddenly felt the dog leave that part, and start on his legs. He could feel the presence of a female close and knew that it would be Hana. "Uzumaki-kun, allow me to strip you down to your underwear, or if possible entirely? It will allow me to smell your scent better, since my dogs aren't experienced with crimes like harass, or murder and harass together, since they might confuse the scents with each other at times." He nodded and he sat up and began to fumble with his pants, finally getting them off after half a minute of making sure that the damn zipper opened. He slid his pants down, and then lowered his underwear. He heard Hana taking a deep sniff, then she said, "Uzumaki-kun, allow me for a few minutes while I check the samples. Please get dressed." She got the samples from a pocket, and opened the bags they were contained in, smelling no scent of Naruto on it. There were different categories in which it could be classified, and most of them seemed to be able to be identified by the scent of the, which carried a part of the genetic code and through a long and difficult explanation could be explained. "You are not the one who did this, Uzumaki-san." She started to shiver, as the powerful scent of him was still lingering within her nose, making her feel strangely wham, like a bitch in heat. She knew that the feelings must have been evoked by that pheromone thing that he was talking about, and Naruto said, "Good. Will you check the rest of the people available to you for the scent? I'll go back to my house." She looked at him and then said, "Why don't you stay for dinner? I'm sure that you wouldn't want to go back there. It's burned down," she said, looking at him with her eyes slightly hopeful that he would accept. She would like to see different people at the table than her family, but they rarely received guests due to her family's rather unique behavior. "So the bastards burned down my home." He mumbled and then looked at Hana and said, "All right then, I'll eat with your family. Toussaint probably would agree with me." "That I do, she looks good enough to eat. Licking her would also be nice." Naruto blushed slightly and then sighed and said, "Will you give me a tour of the house before dinner?" She gave him a smile and then said, "Hi Uzumaki-san. Follow me." He looked as the room began to fill with Inuzuka clan members, taking note that there was a special table set up for the dogs so they could feel. "It looks rather like they enjoy doing things with their dogs, don't they?" "A very good question. I've yet to meet someone who has had a dog, but I do wonder if that Hana girl likes to do it doggy style." Kyubi's grin could be felt within the back of his mind and he absently shook his head, thinking about Kyubi being too much, and probably wanting to taste some girl once again, before the huge fox died from old age. "Alright people, we have a guest here, Mr. Uzumaki Naruto. So try to behave a bit." She knew that saying this would make sure that the people of her family would eat in a manner which wasn't chewing down on anything on their plates. She spotted her little brother giving Naruto a glare for some weird reason, and then remembered that the kid had been beaten by the same blonde-haired kid in the Chunin exam so many years ago. "Dog biscuit. Pass the rice to Uzumaki-san," she said to him, and noticed the glare turn up a notch to become a look of revulsion, and she watched as he handed the bowl to Naruto like it was something tainted, something that he didn't want to touch. A grin spread on her face, and then she said, "Serve him, dog biscuit, or I'll make sure you'll be neutered by dawn. I do have that license to neuter dogs. You know, humans are in that same category. It will only be messier than with dogs." She gave him a sweet smile which seemed to convey the message of a lot of pain for Kiba. Kiba grudgingly did as he was told, Naruto taking a great delight in being served by him as some sort of retribution. "So the dog obeys his elder SI. Isn't that Karini's smell? Do you know you carry Karini's smell on you?" Kiba nodded slowly and said, "She wanted to have the team together once again, and me being the prime student that I am, I came to that meeting a few days ago." Naruto knew that that would be able to explain it all, but he looked at the rest of the family and grinned. "There are a lot of things which could have happened. The scent is still fresh on you, so you've met her some time ago." He turned to Hana and said, "Here is another test subject, Hana-san. Please do with him as you wish. I think you talked about neutering him, so if you just let me and I'll make sure he never reproduces." Naruto grinned and then heard a cough and saw Hana's mother having coughed, and she spoke the moment his head was turned to her. Uzumaki-san, I'm glad you accepted Hana's invitation to dinner. She's such a polite girl instead of Kiba. She grumbled something about additional training and respect, something which Kiba lacked for her or something, and then continued. Are you interested in my daughter? The question took him off guard, and then he looked at the woman, then at Hana and said, I would like to check out what's for sale first. Surely I can't be satisfied with just one woman, or she'd die on the wedding night. Having something sealed within you that grants eternal stamina makes you very good in bed, with detrimental effects for the woman you are doing, of course. A laugh which sounded like a dog's bark was heard, and Inuzuka grinned and said, Seems like you got the right attitude, kid. I like you. She then returned to her food and a piece of chicken disappeared into her mouth. Naruto lifted his eyes to look at Hana and mumbled something into her ear. I'll be going soon, Hana-chan. I want to visit Karini. Hana nodded and then looked at the young blonde man and said, Want me to come with you? She asked in a soft voice, hoping to not attract too much attention from the other people on the table. She would be able to make sure you got there intact. The villagers wouldn't riot if they saw you escorted by a chunin known for her seriousness. However, she has a faint feeling of attraction for you, or someone else within this room, because I can feel how her temperature was beginning to rise slightly the moment we stepped in the house. Kyubi's grin could be felt. Tsusan, please don't tell me that another woman could possibly be attracted to me. Tsunade probably is attracted to me because I look so much like her dead little brother. There is something more to that, my little kitling, a lot more. She cares for you a great deal, warning you about the effort the mortals are making to kill you or expel you from the settlement we lived in for our entire life. Bet her, it will be fun. A mental image accompanied that, and it made him feel very much aware of the tight feeling in his pants, and he looked slightly uncomfortable at being in this position, until someone intervened. Let's go to Naruto-kun. Let's visit before visiting hours are over. She got up, looking at the younger blonde who gave her a look and then rose also, looking at her the entire time. I bid everyone a good evening. I enjoyed the dinner. Arigatou gozaimasu. He spoke in a way which conveyed no emotions, and Hana thought that it was best for them to leave. I'll be back in about 3 hours, so Dog Biscuit will have to feed the dogs in my stead. See ya later, people. She disappeared with a poof of smoke, bringing Naruto with her. They appeared on the roof, taking a deep breath of the air, and then they were off. Naruto didn't really think she could match up with him, turning it into a little race, with the objective of getting to Karini as fast as possible. When they got to the hospital, Naruto put on a face which was colder than ice, a face which he had practiced for the occasion he would either need to fight seriously or that he might be able to make sure that there was a good amount of intimidation assured from that action. How dare you come here, you bastard! Was muttered by a passing medic, and Naruto's face looked with eerie eyes at the medic until he passed him by. He gave a rather dangerous look at the nurse who approached him and said, Say anything and I'll make sure you will be silenced. The threat worked as the nurse paled and then slinked out of the way, looking at him with wide eyes, and he continued onwards, looking at the people in his path and mentally summoning up the will to go and talk to Karini. He was at a loss of what to do. Should he comfort her or try to offer reassurances that all would be fine again if she were awake at the moment? You could just allow yourself to be slipped into her mind and look around for the things which upset her a great deal. I will make sure that nothing happens to your body, not until you are reunited with it. Naruto looked at the door and then opened it, taking a look inside to see the Jounin lie in the bed, unconscious to the world. He gave a sad smile and then came into the room, Hana following her. He noticed Anko and then said, She hasn't woken yet? Anko was initially surprised that Naruto was there, but regained her composure immediately and said, No sign of her being awake, and I've been with her the entire time. Naruto looked at her and gave her an inquisitive look. Were you in a relationship with Karini-chan? Anko looked at him for a moment, somehow not following where the topic was leading to. No, but we acted like we were in front of others just to make that hentai freak Ebisu's nose bleed. The damn guy kept looking at me the entire time, and while I like wearing these clothes, I don't like the kind of attention I receive. Naruto nodded and said, Tsusan has mentioned that there is a technique in which I could be able to make sure that Karini would be awake again to tell us all that has happened. It would require some close contact, due to the fact that there will be chakra and something else transferred to Karini-chan. He looked at Karini for a second, before looking at Hana and said, "Get Tsunade-chan here. She should be able to make sure my body is in an alright state. Tell her that it's urgent for Karini's mental state, and she'll come as soon as possible." Hana nodded and said, "I will be back shortly, Anko-san, Naruto-kun." With a small flicker she was gone, using it to mask her disappearance, still having some style as to not give away her manner of disappearing, which was still a prized secret by the ANBU and should never be handed out, or shown so casually. "Well, I guess we have to wait now." "Naruto-kun, could you tell me how you are going to do that?" Anko asked, looking at him with her eyes looking at him with some small adoration within them. He grinned and said, "I won't be able to tell you what I will do, since Tu-san is handling most of the technique. It will be something like the Yamanaka Jutsu, but then it would be performed by me, and a chain of sorts would be formed between Karini and I. Is that a good explanation, Tu-san?" he asked the Kyubi, who sat there amused. "Indeed, it is somewhat correct, though you were slightly off on the chain thing. I won't be able to fully explain it to you, but it essentially links Karini's and your chakra together with mine, sending you in her mind, as well as allowing me to begin to heal the small mental damage she might have sustained in any matter, since I will be supporting her during the time you will be within her mind. Do you understand? Yes, I go into her mind, and you'll be the one supporting Karini's mental and physical health as well as mine. In a nutshell, that's it." Kyubi's presence within his mind left, and Naruto could feel the small amount of power which increased with a massive surge of the demon chakra of the Kyubi flowing through his coils and veins. The power saturated his blood, making him feel like the veins of his body were on fire, the heart pumping the blood through his body faster and faster as the demon worked its magic. Anko watched as Naruto's face turned redder and redder while he seemed to be in a meditative state, and then she watched as bright lines of red appeared, giving her the impression of fire snaking its way through his veins, making her back down slightly, feeling very uncomfortable around Naruto. She watched as the whisker marks on his face seemed to glow an eerie red color, just like the veins had been before he opened his eyes and said in a voice not his own, "Finally, I have control. Now to make sure that Karini-san is stable, I'll need to make sure that there won't be any foreign chakra sources affecting her." He turned his head towards Anko and then said, Has she been in contact with anyone exposing chakra to her and pushing it into her body, centered on the mind especially?" The question must have been a hard one because he had to wait for an answer. But Kyubi was patient, and knew that the girl who he already considered to be his daughter-in-law. "I don't think anyone has put chakra into her body ever since she was put into that bed. The unconsciousness probably is caused by something else. Might I ask why you possessed Naruto-kun, Kyubi-sama?" She knew that it would be beneficial to her health and the health of the people around her if she remained courteous to Kyubi and not appease its anger, for she knew that she was no match should the Kyubi decide that she would be a nice meal. He might be in a human body, but even then it was a stamina freak with increased healing powers. Imagine Kyubi taking possession of it, and then ruining the entire town by simply using the full strength available to him. She had once heard Hokage-sama remark that if Naruto got perfect chakra control, that he'd be able to be thrice as powerful with his punches as she had been in her prime, and that was enough to destroy a mountain with the tap of a finger. Why did I possess my son? Well, he wanted me to help Karini-san, so I agreed to help him with it. Their minds will be linked, and I will be left to take care of his body, essentially being his guardian. If only the brat could shut down his stupid comments within the mind, then I'd be able to have some peace and quiet for once. Kyubi sighed, and Naruto was raging at the fox within his mind. "Oyaji, how dare you tell me to be quiet? I haven't even started on the next plan of action yet." All of this was shouted and perceived within the mind, thus causing Kyubi a headache the size of the Hokage monument. A bit of movement made Kyubi's eyes dart towards the place where the movement had been made, and he looked directly at the Hokage's face, which was looking slightly anxious. "You said you have found a way to make sure that she's awake again, Naruto-kun?" "Make sure that she is awake again is one of the things I can do, Hokage-chan. But I'm not Naruto, just call me Kyubi and be done with it. I'll be here to stabilize the things on the material plane since his spirit and mind is diving within her mind, thus being able to revive her thanks to the link I will establish. Once he has found her, he must comfort her in a way she would deem appropriate, like some sort of quest he needs to fulfill, and she will awake soon after, Naruto's mind returning to his body. Any questions? Kyubi looked at the new arrivals, seeing that Tsunade was thinking about something. He said, "Yes, he loves you too." With a grin on his face, he watched as Tsunade turned red for a moment, and he could hear Naruto speaking within his head. "I can't believe you told her that. It was supposed to be a secret from everyone. How can someone like me love someone who is 40 years older than me? And let's not forget that she is the Hokage, and easily the strongest woman in the entire fire country, hell, the whole world." Naruto's protests went unheard by the massive fox as Naruto's eyes widened and Kyubi grinned and said, "Kukukuku, I can't believe he'd actually admit that he liked you. Congratulations, Hokage-chan, for most probably becoming one of his mates." Kyubi looked at the bed with Karini in it, and then spoke, a solemn tone in his voice. "Alas, it is not to be, since he might lose his mind with this technique. And I wasn't that correct in my explanation of his feelings. Seems that he wants to make you happy instead of loving you." "Please set another bed next to Karini-san's bed and I will begin with the technique. Don't be afraid if the room gets lit up by my chakra, because there will probably be some that will get transferred to Karini-san to accelerate the technique. Problem is that I don't know exactly how much her body can handle, due to never having channeled my chakra into any other body than Naruto's." Tsunade immediately went to action and came back with a bed half a minute later, looking not even exhausted as she set it down, the springs slightly creaking. "All I could find within the shortest time span." Kyubi nodded and then laid himself on the bed, which was positioned close to Karini's, and he began to focus on the technique which would send Naruto into Karini's mind. With a murmur of a name, a flash of brilliant and brutal red chakra, all was still, Kyubi's red eyes beginning to glaze over as the mind technique was beginning. "Good luck, kid. May you heal her and restore her to her beautiful form." It was an old saying that Kyubi had quoted when he had heard about the mental techniques employed by the Freud guy. He had thought it up himself, making sure that it was appropriate in this situation. With a bright flash, he knew nothing. Naruto, on the other hand, looked around in the area where he was, looking for anything which would make sense. He was in Konoha, but it didn't feel like Konoha. He looked around to see that there were words on some of the walls, while there were pictures on other walls. He looked at the sky, and saw that it was a void, wherein lightning was discharged with a weird feel towards it. He looked at it as the void seemed to want to draw him inside, and he quickly turned away, looking at one of the walls instead. Filth. That word was the only word on the wall, and he looked at it for a while, hoping to decipher what it meant, and what exactly the meaning behind it was. He touched the wall with his hands, feeling a strange emotion of loathing well up within him, so foreign that the emotion must be Karini's. Naruto looked at the other walls and saw that there were other things that were written on them. Bitch. He went to each of the walls, and touched them, feeling the feelings associated with them. He looked at the walls and then touched the one with the word on it. He could feel a faint flicker of something on the edge of his consciousness, a voice crying out something, "Please no." He couldn't hear it anymore, but the voice had seemed like Karini's. He looked around and then went to one of the pictures, looking at them and then touching them too. He felt something within him being pulled forwards, and he watched the memory. Karini was 3 years old at that point in time, and she was happily playing with a man who must have been her father or something like that, because the man had red eyes too, although they looked rather duller than her vibrant red ones. He watched as the man instructed her on how to hold the kunai. He watched as she was focused and tried to hit the target with the kunai, only to have it miss by a few centimeters off the target's edge. Her father smiled at her, and told her that it was okay for her to miss since she was still young. Karini got a determined look on her face, and she hit the target the next time she threw, being excited about the fact that she had hit the target. Her father was proud of her too, that his daughter was able to hit the target, and decided to hold a small celebration of sorts. Naruto pulled from the memory, feeling that he should no longer disturb it with his presence. He wandered through Konoha, taking note of the walls, and the things they said. There was one named Love, and when he touched it he could hear his own voice, as well as someone else talking to Karini and her giving an answer, something which he couldn't hear. He looked around for any sign of the woman, and could hear some sound coming from somewhere where in the real Konoha her house would be. He walked towards the sounds, looking at the walls to see that there were words popping up and changing before his eyes. The thoughts took a turn for the worse as they turned into curses and words which shouldn't be associated with such a lovely woman like Karini. He looked around a wall and saw that the door to her house was open and that the sounds were coming from there. He walked towards the house, hearing the woman sobbing something about not wanting to experience it again, and that they please stop. Guy walked into the room where Karini and the rest of the main people in this story were gathered and looked at the bed which contained Naruto, and then placed the small bouquet of flowers on the stand next to Karini's bed, and he went to the Hokage to ask her what was happening. Said woman was sitting next to Naruto's body and looked at the pulse of the young man and looked up when Guy coughed and said, "How is Karini-san?" She sighed deeply and said, "Currently she is in a coma of sorts, her mind having shut down due to the stress it had while her body was being harassed. Naruto-kun is now trying to make sure she gets out of her coma so she can tell us who had done this to her and make sure they are put to justice." Tsunade's eyes took on a hard glint as she began to imagine taking one guy's family jewels and making sure they were crushed like nuts exposed to a nutcracker. She grinned in a disturbing fashion, next to Anko, whose face also was split by a grin which was even more threatening than the Hokage's grin due to the fact that she had the reputation of being totally insane and unstable even for someone as young as her. Guy looked as Naruto's body started to glow, and Kyuubi's eyes snapped open as the demon looked straight at Guy and said, "He trusts you. Green beast, you may reside here without harm befalling you. Others I would have eradicated on the spot." A grin split the maniacal beast's face, making it look all the more demonic to Guy's eyes. Naruto looked at Karini and said, "Karini-chan?" "It's Naruto." His voice was different here, probably because he was in someone's mind and this must be his mind voice. He looked at her body which was covered with fluids and saw her look up at him, a broken look in her eyes as she cringed at the sound of his voice and hugged her frame in some sort of protection gesture. "Come on, don't be afraid of me. I'm just Naruto and I'm not going to hurt you." He reached out to touch her, but the moment he touched her she let out a shriek which sounded like "get away," and she backed into a corner of the room. Naruto looked at her with a great amount of pity in his eyes and said, "Karini, please. I like you for the woman you are and my heart is breaking to see you like this. Please allow me to comfort you. All is going to be alright again." Karini felt so dirty at the moment that when the hand touched her she backed away, screaming that the person shouldn't touch her. She backed into a corner, hoping that the person would leave her alone. She felt violated, her purity taken from her in a way which was the most brutal, by the people who she had once considered to be trusted by her. To have it taken away by Kiba had made her so weary of it all that she didn't want to wake up and see all the pitying stares by the villagers. She watched as the person approached once more, reaching out for her, probably to take her and press her against the floor again to harass her again. She allowed it, giving up and would just wait for the pain to come again. Internally she cursed her weakness, but her body didn't want to feel even more pain. Naruto watched as Karini backed into a corner, and he reached out to touch her. He watched as she shivered, and then seemed to lose whatever life she had. He took her hand silently, looking at her the entire time, and then gently dragged her to the middle of the room, on a soft spot of the carpet, and then sat down, with her in his lap, carefully held by him so that she would be able to feel his warmth. The feeling of strong arms around her was odd, and she didn't know what to do in this situation. She looked at the face of the person, but couldn't recall who he was. "Yandame-sama?" she asked, hoping that it was him to relieve her of this dreadful existence. She watched as the young man's face looked at her in surprise, then softened somewhat, and she heard him speak for the first time. "Karini-chan. You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Naruto heard her voice and looked her in the eyes, his blue eyes meeting her crimson ones as he heard her speak. "Yandame-sama?" He looked her deeply within the eyes, and cradled her even tighter, feeling her slightly slick body against his. "Karini-chan, you've been through a lot, haven't you?" He watched as she reacted, shivering enough for him to wrap his arms around her, and he whispered into her ear, "I'll make sure that it will never happen to you again as long as I live." She shivered as he spoke that sentence, and then felt his arms cradle her protectively, and he moved his head towards her ear and whispered into it, "I'll make sure that it will never happen to you again as long as I live." She felt secure in his arms, and then she began to cry like she had never done before. The wall of emotions burst from her, and between her sobs she said, It was so awful. They held my arms so that I couldn't move and then they harassed me. I can still feel their hands all over my body, touching me, and I can still feel their presence close to me. Yandame-sama, please help me. Naruto looked at the woman, and he could feel a slight wetness on his cheek, a sign that he was crying at this moment, feeling the emotions she was feeling in the same manner as she was feeling them. A connection between them formed as he began to stroke her cheek and said, "It will all be alright, Karini. I will protect you, like I have said once before. I love you and nobody is ever going to make sure that I will stop loving you." She felt comforted by his words and she looked him in the eyes, looking deep into the blue which was within them. She could feel hope and love welling up within her, and then brought her lips to his, and kissed him fiercely. "Then show me your love," she whispered as their lips parted. She looked at him expectantly, and smiled slightly as he colored a bit, knowing what she probably wanted. The moment that she kissed him made him freeze. He wasn't expecting to get kissed by a woman who thought he was the Yandame Hokage. He looked at Karini and then said, "I am not Yandame Karini-chan. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, the one who went out with you a few days ago." He looked at her face, and saw his words sink in, and he heard her say, "It doesn't matter, Naruto-kun, I'll love you anyways. I need to feel it just this once, the pleasure of a man and a woman together locked in love and bodies." She looked at him with her eyes pleading with him to do it. He could not help but give in. She wanted to feel him inside her, feel how this kind young man would be able to pleasure her, and not cause her pain like before. "I am not Yandame Karini-chan. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, the one who went out with you a few days ago." She heard him say those words and immediately looked at him, and noticed the subtle differences between Yandame and the one who called himself Naruto. He looked cute and she said, "It doesn't matter, Naruto-kun, I'll love you anyways. I need to feel it just this once, the pleasure of a man and a woman together locked in love and bodies." She didn't know why, but she felt connected to him, like he had felt a similar pain, but different. She could feel loneliness coming off him, like a small aura of it had been manifested around him for some time. She looked up to him pleadingly, and then she touched his face and said, "You are the same like me, you've felt the same pain, haven't you?" She spoke in an understanding manner, and didn't even know why she was doing this. His presence was making her focus on him instead of the thing which had made her so messed up. He looked her in the eyes and then felt her hand touch his cheek, and she spoke to him, her voice somehow sounding softer and more seductive than he could ever have imagined. "You are the same like me, you've felt the same pain, haven't you?" He could only nod, and she laid her head against his chest, smiling at him. "The pain is gone, Naruto-kun. I felt pain and felt violated. But now it's gone. I feel the love you had for me, to come here wherever we are." She viewed him in a new light, not the stranger who had comforted her, but as someone to love. She remembered the date they had, and knew that he was just a kid who had been cursed with the QB being sealed within him. He looked so cute when he looked at her the moment she was thinking about him, and knew that she loved him, no matter that she was a 30-year-old woman and that he was 15 years younger than her. Her lips found his once again, and the kiss was full of her passion, of the need to be loved by someone. She had no feelings about the harassment, knowing that he'd probably tear the guys anew. Kiba would pay for doing that to her, as would Asuma. She felt comforted in the knowledge that he would kill to protect her, having proclaimed the liking for him, not the love she felt, and wanting more. She looked at him with her red eyes brimming with lust, to cleanse the taint the men had done with her body in the real world from her spiritual awareness. "Take me, Naruto-kun, make me feel good, instead of those hurtful things they did to me." Naruto could only watch as the woman pressed herself against his body, and then began to trail her finger against his chest, looking at him and licking her lips. She gave him a seductive smirk, and then said, "Let's do it, Naruto-sama." She began to undress him with her hands slowly gliding over her body, making him feel her arms, and he knew that there wouldn't be much to do against it. His shirt was on the floor within moments, and he looked as the woman slid her hand over it, the fluids disappearing from her body as he could feel the surge of infernal chakra seep into her body, being channeled through his spirit, and possibly giving Kyubi a look at the thing they were about to do. Outside of Naruto's body, Kyubi had just finished transferring some of its chakra into Karini's body to help with the recovery. The effects of the small transfer of minds had already been seen by the ancient demon, who chuckled at his son's fortunate situation, and was glad that the neural paths didn't seem fried by the demonic chakra. There had been a small problem with the hormonal production within the brains, but the moment that QB realized that there were no hormones released which would be harmful to Karini, he stimulated the pleasure and the happiness hormones, allowing them to make her feel happy, even though she should be a nervous wreck on the inside. Naruto didn't exactly know why the hell he was doing this with this woman in her mind, where she had been so down before, but he knew that it felt better than anything that he had ever felt. To feel their bodies against each other, linked in one of the best ways. He could feel her mind reaching out to him in some way, and he grasped it instinctively, feeling them merge in a way, feeling the feelings she had at the moment. She could feel something within her mind, giving her feelings she knew she had never experienced before. She could see some flickering images go through her mind and could hear a deep voice speak within her mind with a manner of speaking which made her obey. Follow my son, follow his every whim. Help him achieve his goal of the destruction of this village, and you shall be rewarded with eternal life on his side. She nodded and then could feel herself climaxing, followed by a surge of pleasure coming from the other side of the link, as she screamed her answer. Yes. Naruto could feel her talking with his Otosan, but didn't know what was being said. He heard her scream yes loudly and then he received such a flood of feelings which overloaded his normal thought patterns, keeping him from ejaculating, and he came, the feeling being tripled with his own. They lay there panting, the room still looking as pristine as it had been the moment Naruto entered. He looked at her, and saw that she was clearly looking gorgeous at this moment, and looked to be getting even more beautiful in the world that was her mind. When he felt a pull he knew he would be pulled back into his body, and hoped that all had gone well. He focused his eyes to look at the blank hospital ceiling and he slowly let it slide sideward, feeling extremely exhausted, as the chakra had been raging rampant through his body, the demonic chakra ripping apart his coils, needing them to heal before he could move well. He looked at Karini's face as she opened her eyes slowly, and he noticed that she looked somewhat different than before, something being off around her. She was now exuding a subtle aura of power, and he could hear his Otosan laugh within his mind. Why are you laughing, Otosan? He asked, and then got no reply except that there was something tugging on his sheets. He looked to see the people all looking at him and Karini with hopeful expressions on their faces. I'm back in my own body. He whispered and then coughed, and tried to get up, only to find that it was futile. He grinned and then said, It must have been a success since she is already waking up, and I'm not going to do that ever again. It felt so odd that I don't want to feel like that ever again. The vocal bit was said out loud and he looked at the woman who was just awakening and heard her mumble something. Master? He blinked twice and then just kept on staring as the woman sat up somewhat groggily, and then looked at him and licked her lips and said, Master, I love you. Naruto's eyes widened as the implications of what Kyubi had done sunk into him, feeling a twitch through the bond. Don't address me as master, I'm not worthy of being called that just yet, plus it would seem odd that you were calling me master. The voice within her head was slightly confusing her at the first time that it had spoken, and she couldn't help but obey the command he gave her. Naruto-sama, can we do it again? Her question was out of her mouth before she had really thought about it, and she colored, feeling the love that he had for her and the rest of the women in the room. She watched as he blushed and said out loud, I think you'd better tell Tsunade-chan who's harassing you. Try to remain calm. He watched as she suddenly seemed to grow depressed once again and felt a wave of emotions wash over him, feeling the pain she had endured once again, and he heard her speak, Hokage-sama, I'll give you the names of the men who harassed me. Just promise me one thing. As Karini finished, Tsunade said, Yes? If it is within my power, I shall do the thing you ask of me. Tsunade was being formal with the younger woman, since she felt like she should be responsible for once, and not be someone who got the reputation that she had collected over the years. Naruto got an almost demonic smile on his face because he knew the answer would come out of her mouth before she had spoken it. He wanted to carry it out, and do even more so that it would be a monument that one does not cross Uzumaki Naruto that easily and gets away with it. Hurt them as much as possible for the things they did to me. Make sure they feel the pain twice as much as I have felt it. Naruto looked at Karini's face, checking for any reaction. Of course I will make sure that they get aptly punished, Karini-chan. It is after all one of my women which has been violated. The manner in which he spoke seemed to make him more brutal than he in reality looked, making him seem like the brutal monster which Kyubi had been before it had been sealed. She looked at him and said, "Master, I'll make sure that you get those names. They are Sarutobi Asuma and Inuzuka Kiba, my own students." She looked at Naruto, who began to turn a rather red color, knowing that there would be a very terrible day in store for the two. Hana was in a similar position, looking with flames literally coming out of her eyes at the mention of her brother being the one that had harassed Yuhi Karini, making her feel so angry at him that he'd at least lose his private parts. "Kiba! I'll murder you for that!" That shout was enough to make the rest of the room take action, and Tsunade looked at Guy, Naruto and Hana and said, "Alright, I have a mission for you. Capture Sarutobi Asuma and Inuzuka Kiba at all costs. They are quite dangerous, so if you inflict any wounds on them, it's allowed." She seemed to think about it for a while and then said, "I'll join you so I can tell them personally that I'm rather displeased with them." She gave them a savage grin and then they were off, leaving Karini alone in the room, said women, beginning to think about how she would make sure that Naruto would love her and make hot love to her. Naruto looked as they passed several houses by jumping over them at the small people which littered the streets. He searched for the man with the beard and the dog-loving boy, hoping that he would find them first and teach them a little bit as to why they shouldn't harass someone he cared about. Tsunade was by his side, having opted to split the teams up to search the wider area. She looked around, searching for the aura of the people in question. Guy looked around too, but in a different manner. He looked at the people as he zoomed past them, the weights being thrown from his feet the moment he left the hospital. The assault on a fellow jounin had made him so enraged about someone wanting to steal the innocence of such a beautiful lady without her consent. It was youthful. He spotted his student, and then called out to him, "Lee!" Chunin looked up to see his sensei land next to him, a look of rage on his face. "Guy-sensei, what happened?" The man looked at his student with a serious look on his face and said, "Follow me to search for Sarutobi Asuma and Inuzuka Kiba. They are labeled as criminals for the offense of taking someone's innocence." Lee's expression changed and he said, "Yes, I've heard about that. I couldn't believe Naruto-kun would do such a thing. He's too honorable for that. I shall help you take them alive." With a nod of assent, the jounin and the chunin disappeared as the weights on Lee's legs fell off by a move on the boy's part. They went to scour the city for the two ninja, looking everywhere in their zeal to get them. It would be Hana who tracked them down at the first moment. She looked and saw her brother walk there, looking innocent, and she landed in front of him, and said in the coldest tone she could muster, "Kiba." She looked him in the eyes and he took a step back, looking at her with some small amount of dread building at the base of his stomach. Has she found out about it? The thought was racing through his mind as he looked at the not-so-pleased woman in front of him who started to crack her knuckles, and a sadistic smile bloomed on her face, making sure that she looked as demonic as possible. "Inuzuka Kiba, at the order of the Hokage of Konohagakure, you are under arrest for the crimes against one Yuhi Karini. Come with me peacefully or I will use force if need be." She was still being formal, but she was literally begging in her mind for her little brother to show one small bit of resistance so she would be able to use some pretty painful moves to disable him. A bloodthirsty smile came on her face as she watched as the boy seemed to fume inwardly. Then she watched as Akamaru jumped from his vest, and he said, "Sister, you've made the wrong choice by messing with things that don't understand. Karini-sensei is mine. I had her longer than that demon, Naruto. He broke the law. Now things will get rough." She smiled and said, "You just broke an S-ranked law, Kiba-kun. I should kill you now, but because Hokage-sama wants to have a little talk to you, I'll let you live." She smiled and Kiba retorted, "You can't beat me if you don't have your dog with you. Akamaru, let's do this." The dog fell in line with its master, then growled at its master's sister, not seeing too much of the danger within it without the other dog, which was its senior and more powerful. Hana gave Kiba a smile and said, "Did you really think I hadn't brought some backup? Enko-chan will be here within moments after you attack me, but still I'll take you on, just for the honor of fighting against the criminal and probably roughing him up quite a bit." She grinned in a disturbing fashion, not unlike Naruto, whose grin was also like that, but this one was one of pure dark glee, like she had been corrupted by the darkness which clung to Naruto, making him look like the next coming of God to her. She looked at her little brother then said, "Bring it on, punk." She made the familiar hand gesture of "Come and get me, you bastard," and Kiba was indeed the first to attack. "Come on, Akamaru. Let's make sure that she doesn't move afterwards. We'll find some way to explain to Mom why Sis is dead." The pair began to power up for a combined Getsuga, Akamaru not being slightly remorseful because his master would know what to do. The pair sat on each other, Akamaru sitting on Kiba's shoulder and the Jujin Bunshin activated, making Akamaru into a perfect copy of Kinba, then the two launching their attacks simultaneously. She looked to see the two come at her and gritted her teeth before jumping out of the way, smiling slightly as he hoped that the exploding tag she had left behind would make sure that they would at least be hurt by it for a small bit. It was almost enough to kill a man, but leave him in a crippled state. "Kiba, I'll date Naruto-kun if you don't surrender now." She looked and saw him jumping away in time to avoid the explosion, grinning at her and said, "I'll have you first before he ever touches you. I will make you my bitch." "Alright, when did we forget to send him to a shrink? Make me his bitch, how dare he? I'm your own goddamn sister, you lump-headed. I won't be your bitch, now or ever." She looked at him, smiling all the time, then pulled out a whistle, which made Akamaru cringe as if it was some supersonic whistle which would make its ears hurt. Kiba charged up for another Getsuga, Akamaru not doing so and making sure that she knew which one was Akamaru and which one was Kiba. She threw a kunai at Kiba, whose attack made it bounce off, and straight at Akamaru, who could only dodge it within a moment of a second, getting a small nick on its cheek. Guy and Lee met up with Naruto and Tsunade, who both weren't looking too happy. "We have come to help you, Hokage-sama." Lee's jubilant answer made her grin slightly, and she said, "Look near his house, and we'll do the bars and the smoke shop." Guy and Lee nodded and they were off in a blur of green. Naruto shook his head at the antics of the green beasts, sighing once, and then saying, "Alright, let's look there and hope we find that bastard." There was a sadistic look on their faces, which didn't promise much good for Asuma once they found him. Naruto entered the smoking shop, looking through all the cigarettes and the cigars for the man, Tsunade checking out a nearby bar. He spotted a strangely familiar coat, and then tapped the man on the shoulder, watching as Marino Ibiki's scarred visage looked him straight in the eyes and said, "What do you want, kid?" Naruto gave the man a smile and said, "Would you like to help interrogate the criminals of Yuhi Karini?" A slightly dark smirk came on his face, then he watched as the same smirk materialized on Ibiki's face and said, "Have you caught them yet? Otherwise I'll call a few of my men to capture them." Naruto smirked, then said, "Hokage-chan wants to capture this one herself. She sent Anko and Inuzuka Hana to capture the other one, coincidentally Hana's younger brother, Kiba. I want to make him feel much pain." A sadistic smile grew from the smirk they had on their faces and Ibiki said, "I guess I can get to liking you, kid. If you ever want a favor from me, all you gotta do is ask. Nobody does something horrible like that to my old playmate or face me. I was about to conduct my own investigation soon, but you beat me to the punch, so I guess I owe you a favor." Ibiki gave him a serious look and said, "Tell Hokage-sama to leave something for me. I must be off now, preparing the rooms for the men." Naruto mock saluted the man and then watched as the Anbu interrogator left the shop, disappearing in a storm of leaves the moment that he was outside the shop. Naruto grinned and he began to leave the shop too, hoping to find Asuma somewhere he could easily be captured, beaten and then sent to Tsunade-chan, who would beat him even further, and then sent to Ibiki, who would put him on the fringe of death. Tsunade did have less luck than she had anticipated, no trace of the man being there at all. She sighed and then went into the next bar to ask where Sarutobi Asuma could possibly be. The man himself was about to leave for his normal work, ignorant of the fact that there were a few shinobi out for blood on his trail, when he heard a knock on his door. Still oblivious to it all, he wanted to get the door, then opened it, and said, "Yes? What can I do for you on this fine day, Gai-san, Lee-san?" A fist slammed into his face and Asuma was smashed back into his house, surprise registering on his face as some blood came from his nose, Guy speaking up immediately after he had pulled his fist back. "By the order of the Godame Hokage, Tsunade-sama, you, Sarutobi Asuma, are arrested for the harass of Yuhi Karini." Asuma took no further chances, then dashed into the house, intent on using the escape route so that he could flee from the two green beasts and make sure that he was well outside of the city, probably being ranked as a nukenin of A rank. He didn't care about it anymore, he just wanted to be spared of Tsunade-sama's punishment, which would involve some gruesome torture, he imagined. After all, he had harassed one of the women, with the Godame being on herself, and thus probably digging a deeper hole. All because she likes that demon, and not someone who would be a little bit normal, like Jiraiya-sama. I lost the bet that they would eventually get together, so I decided to make sure that Karini-chan was mine. His thoughts were all over the place as he fled his house, looking no tea back at one time, hoping to get out as soon as possible. He looked at the roofs, then began to go at a full sprint towards the gate of Konoha. Naruto could sense a chakra moving towards him at a speed which was like the speed of a fleeing animal, hearing the heartbeat increasing, and also sensing two familiar chakra signatures, of Lee and Guy coming in fast behind the fleeing on. He jumped on a roof, watching how the two green beasts were charging after the blur which was identified to be a still smoking Asuma, the cigarette serving as a way to confuse the pair to make sure that there would be some distance kept between the two. Sarutobi Asuma, face my wrath. He looked at the man and began to charge a Rasengan in one hand, it pulsing with a red light as he began to pump his demonic chakra into it, making it look all the more dangerous, and it had a lot more power behind it, enough to knock the man out. Tsunade appeared on the same roof as he was looking at the Rasengan and saying, I don't want him in two pieces, Naruto-kun. Use something which isn't lethal, and if that isn't possible, just restrain him and I'll take care of him. She smiled sweetly at him, then got into a ready stance. Naruto could feel the chakra beginning to make a way through his veins towards his arms. Toussaint, what are you planning on doing? He asked, and the Kyuubi simply gave the mental picture of a huge claw made of chakra grabbing Asuma, and then slamming him into a roof for good measure. Naruto looked at his enemy and shouted, Take this, you bastards. Then two huge claws made of brilliant red chakra came out of the hands, then arching towards Asuma and grabbing his waist and smashing him into the rooftop 3 times, dazing him at least. Naruto grinned as the chakra claws began to come back to him, dropping the dazed man on the roof in front of him. He's all yours, Tsunade-chan. He grinned at her, and she lifted the man by his neck, looking him in the eyes with her own brown eyes blazing in anger. I once was sure that you wouldn't do something like that, but clearly I was wrong. Did you enjoy it, Asuma? Did you enjoy doing such a thing in Karini? She gave him a deadly smile and then pressed his face into her cleavage and said, Feel this once for the last time because you are probably going to have a very painful time ahead of you. She gave him a smile and said, What shall I do with him? Rip his balls off and let them be eaten by dogs while he's watching? Or shall I let him eat them? She gave a smile which looked very much like a shark's and then grabbed him in the crotch with her free hand, watching him turn pale as she applied some pressure with her hand, thus making him very uncomfortable. Rip them off, then let him eat them. It will be torture to eat them, as they are filthy like he is. Ibiki asked if he would be able to have him in the torture rooms. I guess you should be grateful that Ibiki needs you because otherwise I'd have executed you here and now. She gave him a sweet smile which promised a lot of pain in the future, and then made sure that he was securely wrapped up in enough ninja rope that he'd be able to only move his pinky, which was then bound even tighter than it because genjutsu could be done with only a pinky at the disposal of the victim. Naruto looked at the bound jounin and grinned as the man struggled against his bounds, not being able to move an inch. So this is how it looks when a jounin is being bound by a Hokage. Asuma looked at the demon container who gave him a look which stated that he was clearly overpowered, that being true in every aspect. Tsunade took a hold of his arms, lifting him into the air effortlessly, and then said, Let's bring you to a nice cell, Asuma-kun. I'm sure that Ibiki would love to have a nice little chat with you about the harassment of one of his childhood friends. You didn't know that they were best friends in their youth? Well, let me tell you that they both are still kind to each other, still being friends and stuff. You didn't know that he's been pretty anxious to start searching for the guys who did that to her, didn't you? Naruto-kun met him 5 minutes ago and Ibiki told him that he's already preparing a nice little cell for you and Kiba. Asuma could only groan since Ibiki's prowess at torture was legendary, that man being able to get everything out of person through a blend of torture and pain. The worst thing was that the man seemed to enjoy doing it, and Asuma had a sinking feeling in his gut that he would be the first one to really suffer the man's displeasure, something which was not a fate to look forward to. He watched as they carried him towards the new accommodations that he would have soon, the Anbu torture division. The moment they got there, the scarred interrogator was already watching them, a scowl on the man's face. Kiba, on the other hand, was still locked into battle with his sister, who kept on dodging his every attack while taunting him like mad, saying things that he was too small to cause any woman pleasure, to which he retorted that she would be the first one to experience it. Hana looked at her younger brother with a small mix of worry in her eyes. Where the hell I Anko / she should have been here already. Just when she finished that thought, a huge amount of snakes came flying from one direction, forcing Kiba to dodge them or else get hit. Mitarashi Anko appeared on a rooftop, grinning like a lunatic. I see a little boy who wants to play with the big and bad Jounin. Come here, little doggy. Come here to your death. She giggled in a truly disturbing fashion before releasing another round of snakes from her sleeves, making Kiba need to dodge once again, one snake nicking his flesh and drawing some blood. Is the little puppy bleeding? Oh, come on, let's just make this more fun by allowing you to get even more hurt. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 20 copies of Anko appeared on the surrounding rooftops, and as one they launched an attack on the dog boy who was powerless to resist. A kick to the face, one to the ass, one to the side, one in the balls, one against the back of his face, one against his ribs, and a fist grabbing his clothing by the chest was all he got. The Bunshins popped out of existence, leaving Kiba in a lot of pain, and a grinning Anko looking at him. You should have thought before you harassed my best friend Kiba-kun. I get violent when people hurt my best friend. Naruto-kun really wants to make sure you get a horrific fate in store for you, so I think I'll just traumatize you a bit. She grinned once in that disturbing fashion of her, and then withdrew a kunai from between her s, looking at him the entire time, making her tongue wet her lips as she began to draw some blood on Kiba's arm, into in the spot where a major artery lay, but somewhere where there would be blood flowing. She brought her head to the cut and began to drink the crimson fluid which poured out, her soft lips touching Kiba's skin. After she was finished, she looked up and spat the blood out in Kiba's face and said, "It tastes like filth, and you are unworthy to have it drunk by me. Alright, now I'll make sure you get a lot of pain." Senin Goroshi. She appeared behind him and was about to shove something into his ass, and she finished another jutsu in time, Siniayashu. The snakes began to come out of her sleeves and burrowed themselves in his ass, making his eyes wide, and making the people watching the battle go stiff in the pose they were standing. They hadn't dared think that something like that was possible with snakes. They are moving. Kiba groaned as the serpents began to burrow deeper and deeper into his ass, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. He looked at the woman, then collapsed unconscious. Anko gave a smile, then let the snakes made from chakra disappear, hoping that her chakra wasn't dirted by that. 20 moments later there was an unusual meeting. Marino Ibiki stood in the middle of the room, looking at the two stupid idiots who had harassed Yuhi Karini. He got a creepy grin on his face, and pulled off the bandana, grinning as the men recoiled at seeing the scars. Well, you've been rather bad boys. Why don't we allow some people to have some well-willed revenge on you? Hokage-sama, please come in and give them a sign of your displeasure. The man looked at the door and Tsunade entered, her face a cool and calm mask, with a creepy smile on her face too, and she walked to one of the racks on which Kiba was currently strapped to, dressed in only his underwear. I hope that you might have remorse, but really, wanting to kill your own sister, and then having the remains isn't one of the things I would tolerate happening around my village. Hereby a little bit of a prequel to what you'll experience. With a lightning-fast movement she grabbed him in the crotch, then squeezed hard, feeling how his genitals were crushed in her hands like wet grass, some of the fluid seeping through the thin piece of fabric that was Kiba's underwear, with the boy howling in pain as the genitals were still being crushed by Tsunade. Do you feel this pain? It is almost exactly how Karini felt when you two harassed her. I'll heal them for now, and make sure it's alright, but only because I have a few things that need to be done before you get your punishment. She made a few hand seals and Kiba's genitals began to reform exactly like they had been. She smiled and then went over to Asuma, who gritted his teeth as she repeated it, grabbing his balls first, then crushing them in a fast motion, making him scream in pain. Then she went to the main rod, then broke it, and nearly ripped it off. The healing jutsu did its work once again, and it left 2 sobbing men in the room. The next person to enter was Hana, with a rather feral-looking dog, who looked at the 2 men with a dark glint in its eyes. "Well, it seems like you've really gotten yourself in a tight spot, Kiba-kun. Go for his balls, Kuramaru." The dog obeyed its master, going for the boy's balls, ripping them off, leaving Kiba to do a horrific wail. Hana forced open his eyes to look as his balls were spit out in front of him, tears now welling up from them. She gave the dog a sign. Then the same procedure was repeated with Asuma, who looked ready to die from the pain. Ibiki just watched, looking on as Hana began to apply salt to the bleeping holes, watching how the men would cringe when the salt hit them all, howling in pain all the while. "I got to recruit her for my division. She's great, going to good lengths to break them. I'll call Tsunade-sama to heal them up once again, because I know that a certain blonde guy is waiting to have a conversation with the 2 of them. He's giving off more demonic chakra than you could possibly believe, so pissed he is." Hana smiled creepily at the man and said, "Allow me to at least make a mark on them." She withdrew a kunai, then slowly sliced some words into Kiba's chest, willing them to remain there, reinforcing the kunai with chakra so they would. "This man is a criminal who tried to harass his sister, and already has harassed a woman. Beware, Kiba would have to walk around forever with that one his chest, forever making women afraid to be near him." Hana grinned, happily skipped outside where she saw both Tsunade and Naruto stand, the latter exuding a visible and probably touchable chakra which seemed to be red with black in it. "You need to heal the boys. Then it's your turn, Naruto-kun. I'll wait here in case someone might try to." The 2 green beasts appeared at that moment, and followed Tsunade inside, hoping to dish out a verbal barrage. "How dare you sully the honor of one of the greatest women Konohagakure ever had?" Guy started, before being joined by his apprentice, the furious Lee. "You dared to do something as vile as harass to such an astounding woman, who recovered from it thanks to Naruto-kun's help. You are not worthy to be called shinobi, you are trash." The small version of Guy stopped and looked at his sensei, Guy-sensei. "Lee," the man uttered before they began to hug, something which was torture in its own right due to the fact that they wore tight spandex which made them look gay in everyone's opinion. Both men tried to avert their eyes but couldn't. Ibiki secretly smiled, looking at the pair as they were being tortured by the visage of Guy and Lee hugging, tears coming down their face as they lamented the fall of 2 great shinobi, and the dishonor they had brought upon the village. The men left the room, but not after punching both men in the gut, spitting in their faces. Guy and Lee's eyebrows would haunt the men for the rest of their lives as they seemed to live independent lives than their owners. Naruto entered the room, an air of instability around him as he looked at the 2 men, then said, "Do you know why I am so pissed at you?" The 2 men nodded, knowing that fighting back was useless. Naruto chuckled and said, "Ibiki-san, would you please leave the room? I want to talk to them alone." Ibiki gave a small smile, then said, "The salt is in the top left drawer of that cabinet there. Use with caution for your own wounds though if you have them. It's very concentrated and able to cause a lot of pain to people with open wounds." Ibiki left, hoping that the kid would use it well, because he wanted to play with them for a bit. "Well, I'll kill you anyways, but Ibiki wants to play with you, let's go to the torture bit for now." Chakra began to swirl around him, and he placed a hand on Kiba's chest, letting the demonic chakra flow out and into the heart, where the thing began to convulse as the dark and foreign chakra began to make sure that the tissue died, making Koiba feel like death was encroaching on him. Then the chakra flow was halted, and Naruto looked at Asuma, and a tail made of chakra shot out and pierced the man's leg, making the dark chakra flow into it, and a dark coloration began to spread all over the flesh, aiming it looked sickly and giving off a stench which made it clear that the flesh was beginning to rot. The man wailing in pain while Kiba was panting like mad, the near heart attack making him unable to speak. Naruto relished the feeling of fear from the toe. "You should have thought of the consequences when you harassed Karini, little humans. You will feel my wrath, as well as Kyuubi soon, when he will be unleashed upon your little mortal asses." Naruto was now clearly beginning to look insane, looking at the 2 and beginning to pump dark chakra into them, Asuma's leg having lost its flesh, the tail having moved to his arm, causing ungodly amounts of pain before the flesh began to rot away, while Kiba was on the verge of collapsing as Naruto had placed a hand on his crotch and was now channeling the dark energy within it, making him feel the pain that Kiba was in slightly, and he smiled as he watched the flesh turn blackened and then watched as the thing simply fell off and landed on the floor. Good luck with it all. I'll heal you this time, not being as good as Tsunade at it, but I'll leave a mark. He grinned and his hands weaved a jutsu, making the seals and everything reattach themselves to the body they belonged once again, and the flesh turned back into the healthy thing it had been, and Kiba smirked, the pain already having been dismissed as a genjutsu, a sum of being more careful. Naruto gave them a deadly grin and then said, "See you later, by the way, enjoy the salt." Within a mere second, thousands of cuts began to open on their body, the chakra exploding in small amounts, thus cutting the skin. He went over to the named cabinet, then threw the salt over their bodies, making them scream in agony. "He's all yours, Ibiki-san." Naruto hummed a cheerful little tune as he began to make his way out of it. He heard a voice close to his ear whisper, "Want to join us for some tea?" He looked to see Tsunade, Karini and Hana standing there, all looking at him. He sighed and said, "Some tea would be nice. It'd be nice to talk with Karini again and tell her about the things we did to them. And I think my little trick with their genitals will surprise them when they blow up." Naruto smirked at the ladies, and they took his arms, then walked with him to the closest place where they could get something to drink. He looked at the ladies, and a small smile slipped on his face, as he watched how the women seemed to be chatting, and Karini seemed to be doing better. They got to a tea house in no time, Karini pointing out that there was one very close to the torture and interrogation division, and if they would like to have it, her treat because they brought those evil and vile bastards to justice. "I have one question, ladies. Why do you like me? I am nothing but blight on this place, and bound to be exiled within a month or something like that. Why do you keep hanging around with me, and going on dates with me?" He looked at the ladies, who looked back at him, and Tsunade was the first to speak. "We don't think you are a blight on the village, Naruto-kun. I love you for the person you are, no matter that you got the QB sealed within you. The way you speak, the way you act, all makes me just want to tear off your clothes and make sure that there will be some going on." She grinned as the images assaulted her mind, of her just asking to be at on the very table. Was someone just ordering the other people out of it? Or her being busy with giving him some pleasure under the table? There was after all a pretty long cover to the table, one which wouldn't be much trouble to get under. The look on Tsunade's face seemed to mirror Jiraiya's, and Naruto couldn't wait to tell the woman that she had just looked like her ex-teammate. Naruto looked at the other two ladies, and saw Hana looking at him with her face looking slightly interested in him, and he unconditionally shivered, not knowing that the woman might be thinking about him and her doggy style, or at least something. Hana looked at the Jinchuriki and said, "Is there a limit as to how much you can do with your stamina, Naruto-kun?" She wanted to know the answer, because it might be a very nice evening for the both of them if she had gotten her will. The sheer amount of hormones that Naruto seemed to produce was making her horny as hell, and she wanted nothing but to have his big thick rod in her waiting snatch. She looked at him, and then absently wiped the drool off her chin, as she had been drooling at the thought of what he could do if he had a good amount of stamina. "I'm not sure if there is a limit to my stamina. I can go on for hours training without even feeling faint or weak at all." At that, Hana, Karini and Tsunade looked at each other, and said, "All right, we share." They said it all at the same time, thus making it look slightly odd, but when one of the waiters came to take their order, Naruto had managed to get them to calm down that there would be no sharing just yet, and that there wouldn't be much to do, except him testing out the powers given to him by his two-san. "Can I take your order?" The waiter kept on glaring at Naruto, who simply growled at the man, and Tsunade ordered, "Yes, I would like to have a cup of tea. And what would you have, Naruto-kun?" Naruto grinned at his pretty bachan, and then said, "I'd like a cup of tea too, and preferably with a ripped-off tongue next to it, because I'm feeling a bit hungry, and normal souls just won't work, and I seem to develop a craving for human flesh." Tsunade looked at him sweetly and said, "Would you want me to rip off one of his hands? I can do it easily with my strength." Karini added to that, "I might like a piece too. But does it have to be raw? I dislike my raw meat." And then Hana had to give the final piece of grace, "I'd like to make sure that it's turned into dog food. My lovely puppies are a bit hungry, and it would be nice to get them used to human meat. The waiter looked at the Hokage, a Chunin, and one Jounin, and the much-hated demon, all talking about how they would rip off his arm, and then probably eat it, or grill it, or even make it into dog food. Don't worry, we're just kidding, we wouldn't eat you, human flesh tastes quite bad. The Hokage assured the man, before turning to Naruto to begin to talk about a way that the medical regeneration could not be used on him. The waiter felt a bit more relieved, but paled nonetheless when he saw Naruto looking at him with blood-red demonic eyes, and quickly hurried to get the order, and then take some leave, just because he didn't want to see those eyes again. Tsunade talked about the regeneration with quite some fire in her voice, and thus it is pretty much impossible to apply it to you, since there wouldn't have been any flesh to regenerate since the QB takes care of most of the regeneration, and that would thus make it impossible, unless you had a seal on your body, which would block your chakra. When Orochimaru attacked you in the Forest of Death, or more likely known as Training Area 44, he placed a seal on you which made it hard to access your chakra, right? She looked at him, and he nodded, looking at the woman and then replying, yes, the old man put a seal on my body, which blocked most chakra from me, and those bastards didn't even seem to notice that I had been tagged with one too, only caring about their bastard Uchiha. May he rot in hell itself for the way he has been treating me, and the rest of the village. Tsunade was of the same opinion, not wanting to see a precious person close to her hurt, or even wounded by someone of the village she had sworn to protect. She absently thought about the thing about the exile of Naruto, and she would probably turn Nukenin herself, being the first Hokage to have done so, and she knew every little bit about the defenses of the village, knew every name of the Anbu, and thus would be able to assault the village without causing much ruckus, and assassinate all the important people before anyone had a clue she was there. Being a proficient genjutsu user made her able to create real illusions, which couldn't be easily dispelled, and for a moment she wondered whether Orochimaru had been a fool, or extremely smart to leave the village. After all, a village seemed to cramp one's movement by binding them to it, and thus they didn't grow stronger than they were. Nukenin were generally very powerful in their own right because they had the manners to travel freely, and learn new jutsu of other villages and being able to make sure that they got away from Konoha Onin. That must have also been one of the ways that Uchiha Itachi had grown so strong after only being away from the village for 5 years. The Sharingan made him able to copy any ninjutsu that he saw, and would provide the way to fight taijutsu, but it was not infallible, since Sharingan users could be beaten by some taijutsu experts who relied on speed and not on strength, like Guy, but he did combine those aspects very well. She thought back to the fight that she had with Orochimaru before becoming the Hokage. The man had wanted her to heal his arms, and she had tried to kill him, not really pleased at facing the other member of her old team, and then having met with Naruto who almost managed to do the Rasengan in a fight he had against her. The man had been stronger during the fight with the members of his old team, and she still couldn't quite piece together how he would have been able to defend himself without the use of his arms, the boy who was with him having made the seals for the summoning, and Orochimaru only being able to make the Kusanagi stick out of his throat, and her remembrance at the feeling of his tongue as she had grabbed it, and then brought her fist against his head. She had been enraged at that moment, wanting to smash his head in for causing such a bright young man to die, and she didn't want to see anyone die for her, not like her fiancé and her little brother had done. Karini looked at the blonde man who had managed to get her out of the comatose state she had isolated herself in after the harass. After she had been brought to the hospital, and could not help but think about the way things would have gone, hadn't she met him. She would probably never have woken up from the isolation in her mind, and thus would have died very quickly, the will to live missing from her. She looked at the whisker marks, which were defined, and making her feel hot in the pit of her stomach, literally wanting to feel the way his blood flowed through his body as he was being pleasured by her. He seemed to be calm and in control at most times, but could change into a murderous beast when given enough reason to. It excited her, knowing that he could change into that at will, and didn't seem to be able to do most of the things the villagers attributed to him. She didn't believe he caused deadly diseases just by looking at someone, nor did she believe that if he glared at someone, that the person would die. Hana looked at the Uzumaki spawn, and a sly smile was on her face as she could see him above her, ready to let her orally service him. He was raw and untamed, like one of the dogs that she grew up with. The gentleness that he seemed to be able to exhibit at times made him all the more appealing in her eyes, and he looked to her with eyes which seemed to be made of the fiercest of rubies, good enough to be able to look upon her and make her feel weak in the knees. Naruto looked at the females with his crimson eyes focused on them, and Kyubi gave him a mental overview of the prime attributes the women possessed. Tsunade seems to be good on the top side, her S being very firm, and not sagging at all, even though she is somewhat over 50 years old, and she still is eager to try out some things in the sack, like that triple tongue twister that she made you do. Then there is Hana, who seems to be as wild as a dog, and probably as amorous as one in heat. Dons think I cannot know that you can smell her arousal, since we are connected. I wonder if she has ever had those dogs with those mutts that she has as a family. She certainly could be kinky enough to try it. Then there is Karini, who seems to be in the possession of some nice S if you go with the fact that they seem to be very jiggly at times, and she easily keeps up with Tsunade in size. The red eyes are also very exotic, and I know you would love to look into them as you to each other like an animal does to its mate. That reminds me actually. When are you going to try out that new form I gave you? New form you gave me? Naruto asked the demon within his mind, who grinned behind the bars of its cell and said, yes, your new form, the demon fox form that you have. You won't be as large as me initially, but with a few years you'll easily be able to make sure that a good portion of the village is demolished with one sweep of your tail, Kyubi remarked, and then absently toyed with one of his tails, brushing the fur with some small bit of telepathic force. Naruto looked at the ladies and let a small smirk come on his face. He looked at their attributes and mentally imagined them in a bed. Tsunade busted stroking his chest while the other two ladies were busy with something else, which had to do with his procreating tools, and he absently giggled, a very unusual sound, which made the women look at him, and noticed the slightly vague expression on his face. Tsunade sighed and then said, do you want us to do something against the slight ache, or want to relieve yourself? She wriggled her eyebrows suggestively, and Naruto absently toyed with the idea, but dismissed it at first, not really wanting to make much known to the people in the hospital. He noticed a pale-eyed girl come towards him, looking at him with her expression slightly angry, and a smile came on his face, and he said, why hello Hinata-chan, how are you on this fine day? She looked at him and noticed his looks and shivered for a moment, but then regained her composure, and said, you put Kiba-kun in jail. You deliberately made one of my teammates be put into jail for the thing you did to Karini-sensei. Karini tensed up, collecting her calm, and looking at her student, and she said, her tone indifferent, he didn't do it, Hinata. As I was the victim and a genjutsu mistress, I would immediately have seen through any genjutsu, no matter the circumstances. I know who they were, and they are being interrogated right now. Asuma watched how Ibiki slowly withdrew the blade from Kiba's bleeding body, and shivered when two Anbu entered with a tray full of salt and some bottles of unidentified fluids. Here is the salt and the acid, Moreno-sama. Ibiki looked at them and then nodded, dismissed. But if you want to watch, or to participate, feel free to do so. They were criminals, and deserved nothing other than that, a long torture session. The two Anbu remained in the room, getting a chair out of a corner, and watched how Ibiki began to get some gloves from a cabinet to the side, and then grabbed one of the vials, and a hand full of salt, and poured the salt over the wounds of Asuma, making Asuma scream in pain. Immediately after that he threw in the acid, and a searing pain filled the wounds, even greater than the salt. Asuma screamed in pain, tears pouring from his eyes as he could feel the flesh being eaten away by the acid, and Kiba gulped at the torture that the older man was undergoing, and felt a hand take a hold of his ass, and then heard Ibiki remark, oh, that's quite a nice torture, but I wouldn't do it too much, since he might like it. With a small shove, he was flipped on his stomach, and he could see the blank wall, and his underwear was ripped off, and apparently thrown into a waste bin, and something gotten from a container. He could feel something cold against his buttocks, and with a start his eyes widened, and he heard a voice near to his ear, a deep masculine voice. Now you'll pay for doing something to the Hokage of Konoha, and those that protect her. And then he could feel something invading his bowels, making him feel the pain of the things going inside, and with a feeling of abject terror, heard the same voice near his ear, and speak once again. Now feel what you did with your own hole. This is what you did to Karini, and I shall not rest before it's entirely within you. Ibiki watched as one of the Anbu inserted a giant dildo into the dog lover's ass, and he heard and saw the young man buck and screech at the invasion of his rectum, and said, "Very good, let's make a Sumakuin feel the same." Ibiki watched as the other Anbu, a female, got out another dildo, apparently having carried them with her, since they were hidden in a special part of her outfit, making Ibiki raise an eyebrow, and say, "Do you always keep two with you?" The female Anbu nodded and answered, "It gets awfully boring on those long night shifts, ever since he died in the attack. But now I know that there will be some use for them in humiliating Karini-san's criminals." With her sword she cut the underwear away, nicking the sensitive flesh of Asuma's buttocks, and drawing some blood. She got the dildo from the covers, and then without much further ado, grabbed it, put it on the little rosebud, and then pushed it inside in one movement. Asuma's scream was heard all over Konoha, the scream making every male, save Naruto, protect their crotch, since it was one full of anguish. Naruto looked at Hinata, and said that was Asuma-kun. So Ibiki went ahead with the cutting of their balls, did he? I only suggested that he'd have their balls eaten by them, but he acted on it. I should hang around the torture division more often, they might pick up some things. Tsunade looked at Hinata and said, "Is there anything you want, Hyuga-san? If not, then please leave us alone." Hinata looked at the Hokage, and then said, "I want to make sure that Kiba-kun gets released, and that monster there gets imprisoned instead." Tsunade, Karini and Hana all looked at the girl, and Naruto stayed remarkably calm, and stated, "Hinata-chan, please leave or I'll rip out your throat, and then use your body as waste disposal unit." His red eyes glittered in the light, emitting a deadly intent which froze her on the spot, a small puff of fire seeming to lick on the corners of his mouth, and he looked at her, fire slowly seeming to creep up his form, giving him an ethereal appearance, and then his hand shot out, and touched her neck, having moved without her knowing that there was movement from him, and she could feel a cold fire go in her throat, making her cough, and smoke began to come out of her mouth, the cold fire burning within her, causing major irritation, but not being lethal, just making sure that she couldn't speak, and that there were small wisps of fire coming out of her mouth every moment of the day. She fainted from the shock of seeing smoke come out of her mouth, and the fact that it made her feel very airy, and weak in the knees. "What the hell did we just do?" Naruto asked Kyubi, who had temporarily taken over his body, and the ancient Kitsune chuckled deeply, and said, "There are a great deal of things that I've learned, kid. She has been under the effects of a powerful hallucinogen now, and will remain in that state for a day or something like that. The fire that came on your body is merely an illusion, while the true chakra leaked into the air and polluted her chakra coils, making her feel high, thus lowering her accuracy, giving her a good case of the giggles, and allowing you to see some crazy stuff that she might be doing. Some people smoked a plant, which they called weed or marijuana, and then got high, and called each other strange names, like Moonbeam, or something like that. They called themselves hippies, and generally caused a ruckus, until their leaders decided that it was time for them to be killed off, so they issued a war with a country across the seas, making sure that there were some hippies sent there, and the rest is history." Kyubi quieted, looking from Naruto's point of view when Hinata began to slowly come to, and giggled as she saw the pretty colors. Seeing a Hyuga giggle like that made Naruto laugh, as the dazed and confused look spread over Hinata's face, before Niji picked her up and went away, Hinata giggling the entire time. "Now that's an effective way to get rid of nasty people, Naruto-kun." Hana complimented him at handling it so well, letting the girl blow smoke out of her mouth which made her nose tingle a bit, and made her feel a bit airheaded was a good punishment for arrogant Hyuga bitches who had done a 180 when she had heard about the Kyubi within Naruto. Karini and Tsunade gave their affirmatives, and they drank their tea, a serene mood settling over all three of them, the strong tea making them calm down a bit, and Naruto sighed when he looked around, to see hateful glares directed at him once again, and he sighed, and wondered why he did it. "Because there are 3 lovely women with you, who would do nothing but strip you and then use your body for their perverse desires." Kyubi spoke up within his mind, and he nearly choked on his tea when an image of Karini, Anko, Hana and Tsunade dressed in a French-made uniform popped into his mental TV screen. and then proceeded to clean him up by using their bodies to rub against him, and then finally cleaning his genitals with their mouth, proclaiming that Master Naruto shouldn't be dirty there, and that they should lick him clean. The nosebleed was evident from his thoughts, and a happy smile was on his face as he slumped in his seat, the mental image having been enough to excite a normal reaction from him, the blood dripping down his lips. The image of Karini dressed in the maid's uniform and getting spanked remained in his mind during his unconsciousness, a subconscious thought within his mind, but not in Karini's mind. A maid's outfit? I think Anko still has one, probably next to that waitress outfit that she keeps in her closet at times. She smiled for a bit, before signaling the waiter that she wanted to pay, and paid for them 3, and then the 3 women grabbed Naruto, and began to carry him to one of their places, a subject of much debate. I think he should be at my place, since he knows it the best, was Tsunade's argument, while Karini insisted that she was able to have a comfortable setting ready for him. Hana didn't really comment on it, other than asking if she could be with him, on which she garnered weird looks from the other ladies. Hana smiled sheepishly, and the women eventually decided on Naruto's place, and then cleaned it up a bit. Tsunade, Hana and Karini watched as the villagers glared at them when they carried the unconscious Uzumaki spawn back to his house, Tsunade having a strange little smile on her face which seemed ominous to the casual onlooker. What a mess. And he has to live here. I'm grabbing a broom and then cleaning up. I don't want to catch a strange disease, was Karini's first reply when she saw the apartment, and then immediately put Naruto down on the bed, and began to clean. The other 2 women helped her. Ibiki smiled as he retrieved the dildos from the men's rectums, and then said, "Thank you for those, Nico, but let me improve on that." He grabbed one of the vials, and then poured the acid straight into the rectal passage. Kiba felt something cold enter his bowels, and immediately began to eat away the flesh, making him scream in pain, and Asuma looked slightly frightened as a cool liquid entered his too, and then joined his comrade in screaming in pain as their bowels were mutilated by the acid. Their screams were heard all over Konoha, causing men to wonder if there was a torture session of men in progress, and not like a man had been scorned by women, but still, nobody dared to go to the torture and interrogation division to find out the exact manner. They were too afraid. A knock on the door was heard, and Tsunade opened the door to look upon an Anbu with a Nico mask, and then said, "All right, what do you want? I don't seem to recall having ordered one of you to come here." The female voice which answered put her slightly off guard. "I came here of my own free will, Hokage-sama. I came to see how Karini-san is, and if Uzumaki-san would be willing to go out with me. My name is Yuzuki Yugago, and I seem to recall you making a point about Uzumaki-san's dating prowess in the last meeting." Yugago bowed slightly and said, "It's been some time since Gekko-kun died, but I want to try to love a man again, and since most of them are arrogant bastards, why not Uzumaki-san? He has more appreciation for us than most, since he wasn't treated with kindness for his life," she finished, and Tsunade had gotten a small smile on her face, and said, "It's up to Naruto-kun in the end, but I can tell that he's eager for more women around him, and in bed, he's like a wild animal, I can assure you that." Yugago stumbled where she was standing. "You slept with him, Hokage-sama?" she said, her voice filled with surprise. Tsunade nodded and said, "He's making me younger every moment I spend around him, not to mention that I actually feel like the years are coming off one at a time when I'm around him. I feel better than I have before, and stronger than before." Swana sighed deeply, and looked at Yugago, and then allowed her entrance to the demon container's home, which Yugago accepted, to see him rest on his bed while Inuzuka, Hana and Yuhi Karini were busy with cleaning the place up. Naruto slowly opened his eyes, to see Karini, Anko, Hana and Tsunade dressed in maids' outfits, and immediately his nose began to bleed again, but he kept his cool at this time when he noticed a masked Anbu stand close. "Hello. So someone decided to look into my mind through our link, and discovered the image I got," he stated, looking at Karini, who didn't even blush, and said, "Of course, Master Naruto. It's a privilege to be one of your women." He did not blush, nor did he give any outward sign of being flattered by that, and hoped that they would do exactly the same as in the image he had gotten from Kyubi. But it was not to be. Anko immediately pounced on him and hugged him close to her, I supplied the uniforms. I got them in one of those stores that always seem to have such a nice selection of outfits. And I got multiple of them, if I ever decided to dress up with a group of women to look the part. I was about 13 when I bought my first one, and Oroki-sensei was so surprised when I paraded in front of him that he had forbidden me to buy them. But he was exiled a week after that. Tsunade just squeezed her S in his view, and he could feel blissful unconsciousness come over him once again when Enko started to massage his privates, before a blinding pain in his tailbone knocked him out. He could feel an insurmountable pain in his tailbone even while unconscious, a sign that there was a tail ripping through his skin, and the feeling of a gigantic amount of power being released within him made him assured of that. To the others it might look like he was just going into a seizure, but this was something that made him want more power, to the point of insanity, and it made him release all his pent-up hatred for the village, and his love for the females. He could feel the power within him swell, and heard his father's reassuring voice in the back of his head. Do not worry too much about it, all will be controlled by me. Have faith in me and I shall make sure that you survive. Naruto couldn't do much other than obey, since his life was now in the Kyuubi's hands. Hana watched as a tail ripped through Uzumaki's pants, to stand in the air as another formed, and then she watched as more and more hair seemed to grow on Naruto's body, thus looking like he had grown fur. She looked to see his whisker marks deepen, and with her sensitive nose she could just smell the pheromones increase by tenfold of what they had been. She could feel herself beginning to show the signs of arousal, indicated by the quickening of her pulse, and the fact that she seemed to be getting wet down there. The maid's outfit seemed to be making her feel hornier, as she could literally envision her giving her master some service. Tsunade was looking at the changing Naruto, looking at him all the time during his change into a fox demon. She looked at him as he seemed to grow fangs and a third tail ripped through his skin, and the clothes that he wore seemed to be bursting at the seams as he transformed into the form that would be similar to the Kyuubi's. She could see that there was a very good chance that he might be pretty well endowed even in fox form, the idea of being taken in that way a bit weird in her mind, but one she could get used to, with some mental preparation and a few sweet words to Naruto. She absently realized that the maid outfit really made her stand out, making her look wise and mature, even though she was around 50 in mental health. She felt like she was 18 or 20 at most times past her 35th birthday. Karini was looking at Naruto as he began to change, seeing the nails slowly change into a fox's clawed paw, and she was reminded of that fateful day in which Kyuubi attacked, standing high above the village until Yondaime fought with it, and then saw the form disappear. The only thing that she did remember of the body of the Kyuubi was that it was large, everything about it large, and even a deep blush settled on her face, as she estimated that the mate of the Kyuubi must be gigantic if it were to impregnate it. Any human would surely be unable to even have that huge thing inside of them, ripped apart or crushed if it even tried to do anything remotely like that. The moment I wrote this, I got an image of Naruto and a female Kyuubi, both in fox form, ing each other, destroying Konoha in the process. At least it would be quite memorable. She absently noticed that Tsunade seemed to be having a bit of trouble with the outfit, but not that she'd mind. Enko's attention was focused on Naruto's crotch. Thoughts of how his little soldier would grow once the transformation was completed were swimming through her mind, filling it with the yips and grows of him making wild sweet love to her, taking every orifice in her body with wild bestial vigor, and then finally making sure that she was pumped full with his. A hint of drool could be seen trailing down her chin, falling on her exposed cleavage, and she could absently make out a shaped thing under those pants. The three ladies admired Naruto's body as it started to change into a demon fox, though smaller than Kyuubi, and the fur seemed to be a bloody red, which made him look evil and chaotic like the Kyuubi had been. The thing which attracted the women the most to him was that he was so kind and that he managed to love them just like the way they were. Karini being impressed by his courteous behavior, Shizen by his prowess, Hana by the way which he smelled, Tsunade by his love for her, and Enko? Enko just liked him until he couldn't move anymore, and she was proud to have been with him. The way with which his body was reshaping itself made his clothes finally break, and his vulpine body began to move like it was being possessed, easily being as big as Tsunade, the size of a small horse. He lay on his side, convulsing with spasms racking his body every time as another change was becoming him. Enko, Karini, Tsunade and Hana were looking at him as his eyes suddenly opened, and he looked at them with red slanted eyes and spoke. Ah, finally in this form, like Tusan promised that I would be able to achieve. I can feel the power flowing through me faster than ever before. To feel it is truly an exquisite experience. Anko couldn't help herself, and she threw herself on the demon fox version of Naruto, and hugged him tightly. Foxy-chan. Kawaii, she squealed, and a big sweat drop was growing on Tsunade, Karini and Hana's head. Is she serious? Went through their minds as Anko kept hugging Naruto and squealing like a little kid with a plushie toy. Yugugo felt slightly off, feeling the presence of the fox demon kid against her body, the feeling being very unsettling to the normally controlled Anbu. She watched as Anko hugged him, one of the most bloodthirsty and insane people one would ever meet, hugging a fox with her iron grip. That's nice, feeling her S pressed against your body. In fact, I would love to come out and mate with the humans since she is so nice to us all the time. Kyubi's voice was in his head and he spoke back. Does it really matter, Tusan? You are gigantic, and I won't like to see Anko crushed underneath you just to satisfy some desire of yours. It was silent in his head, and Kyubi just padded to the back of his cage and sat there, thinking about a possible way to get some. Can I play with you, Naruto? Naruto was on the verge of sweat dropping as she seemed to have reverted into a childlike state, which was very creepy to witness, since there seemed to be a few loose screws in her head, which seemed to contain a childhood persona, a horny persona, a normal persona and an Orochimaru-like persona, which he didn't even want to meet. The Orochimaru-like persona only seemed to come out when she was really angry about something, and then she would kill it immediately. Her hands roamed over his body until they came to his private parts. She tickled him there and he could not help but respond in a normal manner. Tsunade's first thoughts on the matter, oh my god. That looks better than I've ever seen before, is definitively a must. Hana's thoughts on the matter, holy mother of Kami-sama. I gotta get that thing in me or else my name is not Inuzuka Hana. I wonder if he would be willing to just take me while in that form. I don't care if it's taboo or something, I just want to have that thing inside of me. Karini's thoughts, must have. Anko's thoughts, Foxy-chan must be nice to Anko-chan. Give Anko-chan loads of pleasure. It was truly amazing to see the thoughts that went through the females' minds, Naruto remaining unknowing of their thoughts. He looked at the women when he felt Anko stimulate him there, and he looked at them as they bent down and hugged him in a manner reminiscent of Anko, before one of them started to unclothe herself, it being Karini who initiated that. 3 hours later, Naruto looked at the woman underneath him, and shuddered as the last orgasm overtook him, and he rolled off her, his fur absently being matted as Hana just collapsed, mumbling something about doing it with her dogs. This truly had been something out of the ordinary, and he longed to experience it again, only to feel so good. The way which they had made him feel good, by licking and stroking him, was still etched in his mind. With a strange creeping feeling, he felt the tails begin to come back into his tailbone, knowing that the transformation had gone away. He looked at Tsunade as she lay there, looking at the ceiling, a hint of drool on her face, mumbling something about definitively making sure that when Naruto-kun got out of the village, destroy the village and then marry Naruto-kun. Yugugo mumbled something about following the Hokage to the end of the world if she wanted. He absently noticed his hands still remaining clawed, minus the fur, and then decided to go and get a nice hot shower to clean himself off. As the water streamed over his form, he could not help but wonder what the hell had brought that on. But he didn't complain about it, because it had felt so good, and he knew that they must have liked it too, but there weren't other sounds than those of lust coming from their throats. Absently he wondered if it had something to do with the heightened pheromone production or something like that. 3 hours later, he had finally managed to get the women all cleaned up and decided to go and see what Lee and Guy were up to, eventually asking Tsunade for Guy's home address, and going there. He stood outside of the house, which was painted in a forest green color, with some orange decorating the sides. He absently was reminded of the training outfits that they wore as he knocked on the door. He heard someone coming to the door, his accurate hearing noticing that the steps were other than Guy's, and he watched as the door was opened slightly, and he heard a female voice speak. Yes? Guy isn't at home right now, how can I help you? I am Uzumaki Naruto, and I'm here to talk to Guy about something of importance. Is it okay if I wait for him? Your name, miss? His voice was deep and darker than ever before, sounding like a snarl to the woman, and she opened the door, standing there in a traditional yukata, and said, Mato, I am, at your service. Pleased to meet you, Uzumaki-san. Naruto gave a polite bow. I am looking at him with a smile forming on her face. Uzumaki-san. Gai-kun told me that you would be able to stay with him at any time whenever you need a place to stay. Naruto smiled at her, showing his grown canines and saying, he is a very kind man. In a dark place, 2 men were tied to tables, and a sadist was walking around them. So you've still been naughty boys, haven't you? The sadist spoke, drawing a small amount of blood from a wound which seeped some green ooze and the blood richly. She grinned in a particularly bloodthirsty manner, for she was one of Karini's friends, Yukarame Suzume, and didn't like the way that her friend had been treated. While technically being a chunin, she liked to work part-time as an Anbu interrogator, gaining the reputation of a sadist. When Ibiki had given her a call about the criminals, she had rushed there to find the 2 men tied up, and a dark smile had blossomed on her face as she began to make sure that there would be much. She looked at the men, and then withdrew a small vial. This isn't really sanctioned by Ibiki, but I'll use it anyhow. Hokage-sama might be a bit angry with me, but I'm sure she will see the reason. The bluish liquid in the vial made the men shiver as she uncorked it, and an acidic smell came in the room, which made the men cringe and their burned eyes twitched in pain, the acid having been gotten out of it by injecting them with a lot of water, giving them an enema. She put some of the liquid on a gloved hand of hers, and then began to spread it all over their backs, where the flesh was still raw from the cuts and bruises. The flesh began to sizzle, and then she grinned, and then looked at them and got out a bottle with a clear liquid out of her coat, grinning all the while. See this? It's going to be hot. With a maniacal cackle, she poured the liquid over their backs, making them shudder at the cool liquid. Then she waited a bit. Can you smell it? It's a liquid burning agent, used to clean paint stains from clothes, but serves my need as a burning tool. Open wide. She poured a lot of the liquid into Kiba's open, causing him to shudder, and then put a small lighter on his back, looking at him before pulling out a small candle and lighting it, and said, when the candle has reached its end, you're going to burn, doggy. Kiba shivered. What the hell have I done wrong? She was anyhow with the way that she dressed. Suzume looked at him, a glint coming in her eyes hidden beyond glasses, and she smiled. She never was one, just waiting for the right man to come along, and you ruined it for her by harassing her. Now you come, beardy man, son of the Sandaime Hokage or not, you shall not be allowed to evade justice. With that she poured the liquid even more over his head, getting it all over her beard, and then put a candle on his back while pouring a lot of it in his ass. Toodaloo, little criminals, she said, walking out of the door, passing Ibiki in the hallway, and said, enjoy the screams? The candle began to dwindle, the wax causing pain for the 2 men as they could see them in a mirror which they had hanging there, to give more pain to them as they watched what was done to them. Kiba was shaking, the candle on him being nearly done, and he watched as the flames seemed to glow more intensely, a searing pain immediately moving over his body. Ibiki entered the room to see a huge inferno spread over Kiba, dark blue flames spreading and causing pain, without smoke being made. Asuma joined him comrade in the pain a few minutes later, looking at the flames with terrified eyes as the pain spread over his body, searing off his beard and making him close his eyes before they were burned out. A horrible feeling in his gut as the flame reached it there, flew inside his ass, and due to the amount of liquid there, ignited, which sent a huge gout of flame straight out of his ass, making any hairs left there be burned. Kiba was undergoing the same treatment, but some burning amount of shit also flew out, and Ibiki sighed as it caked the wall opposite of Kiba, and called for a medic and a cleanup crew to make sure that the interrogated would be alive. The burn wounds looked painful, and when the medic arrived in the room, distaste was visible in his eyes, the fire having been put out, and the man unzipped his pants and pissed on the 2 men, before using a hose to wash it off, saying that piss was too good for them. Naruto noticed that the woman, who was Guy's sister, looked very much like the man, also possessing the white gleaming teeth that the man had, and the hair wasn't worn in a bowl cut, but rather long, but seemed to have the same shine to it. One of the most distinguishing marks that he noticed was that she seemed to be someone who got along with everyone, as she had set T the moment that he entered the house by using a kage bunshin, explaining that her brother had taught her that technique to help with the household a little bit. Her hair also seemed to spell the words Anian, which was also something that you could see in Guy and Lee. A picture of her and a big tortoise adorned the table, a smiling younger version of her on it, with her arms around the tortoise's neck, and Guy standing on it, dressed in his green outfit. Behind him there were 3 young children, one identified by the slightly grumpy look on his face, the Sharingan activated and a scowl as he wore the Chunin vest, Uchiha Itachi. Another boy was there, but he didn't really spark anything within Naruto's mind. There was a girl, and she seemed familiar, but he couldn't place her. He knew that he had seen her somewhere, and knew that she had to be someone he knew well, maybe one of the older kids when he had been in the academy. After all, Itachi had killed his clan at the age of 13, and was 5 years his senior, so when he had enrolled in the class, the girl might not have been in it. But he could remember seeing Guy once in his youth, with some other blurry figures, doing something for Iruka-sensei. That is Guy's first team when he was a jounin. He was so proud of getting to lead them that he asked Sanname-sama to take a picture, with me hugging nickname, and him standing on it while his genin and one chunin were in the background. Itachi-kun remarked that he'd never seen anything quite like that, but managed to smile afterwards. He was such a nice boy, so long ago. His clan put so much pressure on him that he must have snapped. Such a terrible business. Aha, and who is the girl? She looked at him and managed to smile. Yuzuki Yugago. Guy managed to make an impression on that one. She seemed to be able to want to learn everything from him, but he only taught her what she needed to know, not deeming her worthy of his legacy. She didn't have much in the way of taijutsu, and was more oriented around genjutsu and ninjutsu, but still she knows a lot, including the lotus. Absently he sighed and then waited for Guy to come home, which took around 2 hours, chatting with Ayam about his youth, and then I managed to paint the entire Hokage memorial without anyone knowing about it. It was really funny to see them all look at me with hatred but knowing that they couldn't say anything because of the Sandame's law. You should have seen the Anbu who chased me swear at me for defiling the monument. Iruka-sensei was the one who caught me though. The guy is clever when catching me. I didn't know about the Kyuubi at that moment, so I was only punished with cleaning the Hokage monument, which took hours. She smiled at him, liking him for the way he seemed to make her feel spirited and cheerful. She looked at her brother who entered with his favorite pupil and said, "Guy-kun, Naruto-kun is here to see you." Guy looked at Naruto and smiled, his teeth giving a ping, and making him look like some action hero. Naruto smiled back in his own way, giving off an aura of darkness and evil, looking like a demon in a human disguise. "What is it you ask of me, Guy?" the man said, and Naruto smiled at his comical way of speaking. "Well, if I decide to raise Konoha to the ground, you would fight with me, right?" Guy nodded and said, "This village has too many unforgivable crimes on its name, and if you even manage to convince Hokage-sama that you need to see this village gone, then I shall help you in that goal. Will you help too, Lee?" His student looked at him, his eyes watering slightly, and then the younger one moved, hugging his sensei and saying, "Of course. Naruto-kun is my friend, so I shall help him with whatever he needs my help with," the young one proclaimed, and looked at Naruto, who gave him a grin in response, and then looked at the two of them. "We shall strike at the moment I am banished from the village. At that moment they won't expect their Hokage to be attacking them too, and we'll try to stop her with that huge strength she has." Naruto grinned and then got up, looking at Guy and Lee, and then bowed to them and said, "Thank you again for the help, Guy-sensei, Lee-kun." They both shared a look and Guy handed him a suit of his, which Naruto put on, looking not bad in it, his muscles being more defined, making him look handsome. With a flurry of leaves he was gone, looking at the rooftops, heading towards his home once again, to talk about his plans with the ladies, who had hopefully recovered and were sated, so he wouldn't need to sate them once again.